Hi, I'm Arglefump. This is my mega long review for Nancy Drew, Mystery of the Seven Keys. I am going to try to talk about everything in the game. Hopefully I don't miss something important, like you can hold down the mouse button to skip scenes, and that's an improvement over scene skipping in Midnight in Salem. In general, this game is a huge improvement over Midnight in Salem. The graphics are good, I like the characters, the story feels like a classic Nancy Drew story. She's exploring hidden tunnels and being chased by a ghost knight. The puzzles are... well, half the time they're good. I have issues with many puzzles, which are tied into problems I have with the game's navigation and interface. I was going to talk about that for 5 minutes, but that would be a really boring way to start the video. My other major complaint is that it's often too hard to figure out what you're supposed to do next, even if you're using hints for everything. The hints and task list are not good enough to get players through the game. On a related note, I dislike how Master Sleuth mode doesn't have a task list. I know that's how they did it in the classic games, but ever since Game 26, the standard has been for Master Sleuth mode to have a basic task list, not no task list. The game starts with Nancy getting a letter from Adela Cherna asking her to solve the mystery of stolen gems. The letter does an adequate job introducing the story, but I think the text could have been rewritten to make it better. Instead of setting up the game, the letter cares more about setting up for the Adela impersonation puzzle. There's a brief bit of narration about Prague. It's not bad, but I find it odd. We've never had narration in a previous game, have we? The narrator never appears again after this scene. They easily could have left it out. My guess is that the narrator bit was just an excuse to show off the scenery. The scenery is definitely impressive. It looks great. I was surprised to learn that's exactly what the courtyards look like in real life. I've seen other people make fun of the scenery and characters, but I cannot get on board that hate train. I think the graphics are good. I do think it's silly when you can see two copies of the same character near each other. I mentioned that when testing the game. Kind of. I made a joke that, oh, those two NPCs are twins. I wish I had been far more insistent that duplicate characters should be kept separated, because I have seen lots of angry reviews mention the duplicate characters. I guess there's something about the NPCs that really upset people. I wonder how difficult it would have been to change the colors of the NPCs' clothes to make it less obvious that they're being reused. Most of the NPCs appear to be thinly disguised versions of the characters from Midnight in Salem. I look forward to seeing Blonde Radic with a beard as an NPC in the next game. Nancy enters the cafe, a woman waves her over to a table, they talk about Ned for a bit, and the woman asks whether Shadow at the Water's Edge or Ghost of Thornton Hall was a scarier game. This is the closest that the game gets to pandering to longtime fans. The rest of the game has references in the background, like the bookshelf has books from other games, and there are familiar names on Merrick's order list. That is fine by me. That's how they did little references in the earlier games. A woman comes by, claiming to be the real Adela. Both women accuse the other of being an imposter. Nancy offers to figure it out by asking only one question. I like how the game starts with a little detective challenge, but boy, that's a lot of pressure right up front. I overthought the decision. I probably took about a minute deciding, do you ask about the necklace or the coffee? The necklace is the obvious choice, but maybe it's a trick question where coffee's important. It turns out it doesn't matter. They are both the right answer. Even if you guess the wrong Adela, you continue with the game like normal. They should have included a game over sequence here if you get the answer wrong. Being able to lose in the first 2 minutes of the game is very much in line with the early Nancy Drew games. If you select necklace, the solution is that the real Adela doesn't like her mother. What a mean puzzle solution. If you select coffee, the solution is that the imposter has the wrong coffee and doesn't drink it. Only a villain would avoid drinking coffee. Patricia apologizes for lying to you. The entire thing was Adela's idea, a test of Nancy's detective skills. And here I thought that Nancy's 90-page resume spoke for itself. Adela leaves and players are forced to do a brief tutorial where you learn how to move and talk to the characters. You have to zoom in on the Wi-Fi password, which Nancy dismisses as simple. I didn't know Nancy was a password snob. She writes a postcard to Ned and the game skips to the next day. Nancy gets a text message puzzle that I enjoy. You have to figure out the bold words refer to bookshelf numbers. Then you use the map to find the correct book and to place 4 numbers on the lock. Use math to figure out the other numbers. This is a good multi-step puzzle. It's a great way to start the game. The downside is that the puzzle is completely unexplained. We never learn who sent Nancy the text message or why. It's kind of a big deal because solving the puzzle gets Nancy one of the 7 keys. It's a lot of effort to find the other 6 keys, so who gave Nancy one of the keys for free? Nancy talks to Patricia, who dismisses the book puzzle as unimportant. She recommends a coffee and promises to keep Nancy's detective work a secret. When Nancy clicks on the chair by the window, there's a cutscene of Adela looking fabulous as she enters the cafe. Leo delivers their coffees and drops a card. I like how we get this little preview of Leo before we officially meet him. There is a similar scene the next morning when Radek picks up his coffee. I guess the cafe is the place to meet new characters. Adela gets down to business. She gives you a suspect list and explains the basics of the case. Adela tried to sell her necklace through her friend, Vladena Zloty. She then tried to sell it through a company named Second Shine. When the necklace came back from Second Shine, Vladena discovered the gems were replaced with fakes. Adela mentions that gems in the nearby museum were also replaced with fakes. According to the nearby newspaper, that was 20 years ago. I'm still not sure why Adela brings this up. If it had been 3 months ago, then yeah, that would be worth checking out. But 20 years ago? There's no way that's connected to the current case. And spoiler alert, it's not. It has nothing to do with this mystery. Adela refuses to say anything else once she's done. That is a shame. I wish we could have casual conversations with Adela and the other characters. There are some optional conversations with Elka, Patricia, and Oscar, but definitely not Adela, Vladena, or any of the phone contacts. They never talk to you outside of their predetermined times. The conversations are less open-ended than in previous games, which have a lot of branching options. Earlier, Nancy got to pick whether to ask about Adela's coffee or Adela's mom. She got to pick whether to talk about Thornton Hall or Ryokan Hiei. Nancy does not get choices like that for the rest of the game. That was just a start of game thing. Instead, Nancy gets a laundry list of topics at the start of each conversation, and you have to go through all the topics. It makes me miss the games where Nancy could have different responses to what the suspects say. Like she could have a nice response or a mean response instead of no response at all. I've seen a lot of people complain they wanted to be able to call Nancy's friends for hints at any time, just like the older games. I think part of the reason people want phone hints is because the hint system is not helpful in lots of places. There are puzzles which don't have any hints whatsoever. Which ones? The Marionette puzzle, the 3 Cyberblock puzzles, the 2 tunnel chase sequences, the key weights puzzle, the snow globe puzzle, the lights in the tunnel puzzle, whatever you call the spinning tiles puzzle at the base of the clock, the crown puzzle, and the candle puzzle at the end. Yeah, that's a huge list of puzzles that the hint system completely ignores. Then, you got puzzles which have hints, but the hints are crap! They don't help! The hint for the armor puzzle is go to the museum. That's it! There's no picture of the solution, no explanation of what you need to do there. The only hint for trapping the knight is go to the alleyway, with no mention of what you do there. Opening Merrick's trunk is a 5-part puzzle? The hints cover 1 part and ignore the other 4. There are also things you have to do which don't have corresponding hints. This first section of the game is a great example. In order to complete the task of explore the cafe, you need to take a book from the alchemy section. There is no hint about this requirement. Nothing indicates that particular book is important, even though you must get the book to progress with the game. Players are expected to stumble upon the book on their own without any help. Players also get tripped up with the task of investigating all 3 suspects. A hint would have avoided this problem, but it's more of an interface problem than a hint problem. It's not obvious. You need to look at the suspect list a second time so you can interact with the names. Why can you interact with them now when you couldn't interact with them the first time you saw the list? It's also not obvious you have to click a phone number to have it added to your contacts list. Later on in the game, new phone numbers are automatically added to Nancy's contact list. You don't have to click on anything for that to happen. That works way better. I don't know why she has to manually add phone contacts here at the start when she doesn't have to do that with later phone numbers. And yeah, when I was testing the game, that was something I got tripped up on, but they kept the difficult phone number stuff. Anyway, to get Hans's phone number, you have to take the extra step of checking his website. Again, it's not obvious. You can click on the web address on the suspect list to visit a website. I totally saw people that got stuck because there was a bunch of computer stuff in the game. They thought, oh, well, when I get the computer, I'll check Hans's website. No. Now, if Hans's website had been underlined, or maybe it appeared in a different color on the suspect list, then I would have known you can click on it. Maybe. A connect to the public Wi-Fi pop-up appears. That confuses Nancy. What is this? Who? Better yet, what? I know the game is drawing attention to Lukaji Wi-Fi because it's important later, but I think they should have done this differently, in a way that doesn't make it seem that Nancy has no idea what Wi-Fi is. Maybe they could have tied it to the earlier challenge of finding the Wi-Fi password. Hans's number is at the bottom of his website. When Nancy calls Hans, she's a little aggressive in questioning him. I noticed she does not correct him when he assumes she's a journalist. Hans explains they catalog all jewels on Degas upon receiving them. They double-check all jewels against Degas before releasing them. Degas is an international jewel authentication system. I'm pretty sure Degas was made up for this game, because a real-life version of this system would not be that much of a puzzle to use. It's almost easier to steal the crown jewels than it is to use the Degas database. Hans denies the jewels were stolen on his watch. He tells Nancy to talk to his lawyer. Then he hangs up, and we never hear from him again. Nancy decides to talk to her lawyer, aka her dad. She has to call her dad to leave him a voicemail. Then she has to text Ned because Dad didn't call back. Well, yeah, you just left the voicemail 2 seconds ago, Nancy. I'm not sure this is the most intuitive way for Nancy to get her dad and boyfriend involved in the case, but it's an easy enough puzzle to figure out. Oscar and Vladena are on the other side of the courtyard. You should talk to Hans before talking to them. That's because talking to Hans unlocks a conversation about Degas with both of those suspects. Again, this is something that has tripped up many players. I talked to Vladena for 6 minutes. All the conversations are finished. Why can't I mark talk to Vladena off of the task list? When Nancy meets Vladena, she is struggling with a computer program. This was a lost opportunity to give players a preview of what Degas files look like. Vladena instantly knows that Nancy's here to investigate her. So much for keeping the investigation a secret. I like Vladena as a character. She's so unapologetically mean and self-important. She insults Nancy's looks and intelligence multiple times. She's so rude and nasty, I have a hard time believing Adela's claim that she and Vladena are good friends. Why would Adela want to be friends with her? Vladena doesn't like Oscar or Second Shine. She thinks it's unfair that women aren't allowed to supervise the crown jewels. Vladena brags she's one of the few jewelers who are talented enough to notice the gems were switched with fakes. Vladena claims she cares more about gems than customers, which is not surprising because she's terrible at customer service. Still, Nancy sounds so silly when she asks, "Sales are what keeps you in business?" Yes, Nancy, most businesses make money. Oscar is next door to Vladena. I like his character design, especially the bow tie. I think he's a little boring. The game does not do enough with Oscar. I heard a rumor that he was originally going to be the game's culprit, only they changed the ending. If that's true, it would explain why Oscar pretty much disappears for the final 40% of the game. Oscar knows Adela, even if she doesn't know him. He claims the museum has a lot of security measures in place, which is a total lie. Nancy has 2 puzzles where she steals things from the museum. Nancy finds it suspicious he won't tell her how the jewels were stolen 20 years ago, but I find it realistic that Oscar won't expose the museum's security secrets to total strangers. Oscar thinks Vladena only cares about money, not jewels. He says they don't check the crown jewels regularly. Like Second Shine, he only checks the jewels when putting them in storage or taking them out of storage. The museum is a decent location, it looks good, and I get the sense they did a lot of research for this game. Honestly, all I wanted was for this museum to be better than the museum in a Labyrinth of Lies, and it clears that low bar easily. To complete the task of talking to Oscar, you have to check the artifact next to him. That's another place where players got tripped up. Why does looking at the artifact get classified as talking to a person? Oscar warns it's a priceless artifact that can't be removed from the museum. It's a little silly that he lets Nancy play with it whenever she wants, but that's Nancy Drew video game logic for you. Another thing you have to do on the first day is the coffee making challenge. Patricia insists you have to make coffee for her. She lost 2 coffee parts in the recipe book. They're in the cafe. It can be hard to find them. I definitely got tripped up by the one hint that said, the book is on the shelf near Adela, which does not mean bookshelf. When you find the items, talk to Patricia to start coffee making. I like the coffee challenge. It's like the food making challenges in previous games. It's definitely better than Midnight in Salem's tea making challenge. I think it's got the right level of difficulty, and I would play it just for fun, if not for the latte art. Everyone seems to hate the latte art. That challenge is too tough. One mistake, and you're forced to start over. People struggle with the cursor dot because it is the same color as the already poured milk. Hard to see it. My issue is that the game is too picky about how much of the art needs to be filled in. It'd be fine if you only had to fill in 90% of the empty area, but it's closer to 99%. Also, there is a latte art glitch, which can make it impossible to proceed with the game. That was the #1 complaint people had when the game first came out. It's a game-breaking glitch pretty close to the start of the game. I hope they have a patch to fix that problem by now. You have to make 4 or 5 orders. Patricia gives you a snow globe as a reward. This is innocent enough, but the snow globe ends up being super important. Nancy could not find the ancient alchemist lab without it. I wish we found out where and how Patricia got this ancient snow globe. When you finish everything on day 1, Ned texts Nancy asking if they can talk. Nancy insists on calling him from the cafe. I don't know why she can't call him from somewhere else. If I had to call my wife, I would not do it in the most crowded location nearby. Ned explains he'll be taking the place of Nancy's dad in this game because Carson's voice actor had a scheduling conflict. I mean, Dad is busy. Dad hasn't learned anything about Second Shine. When Nancy mentions Degas, Ned wonders if this is part of an even larger crime conspiracy. This gives Nancy the idea to bring the Hardy Boys into the mystery. They'd be much more useful than Ned. I feel bad for Ned because he has to hear this. I mean, Nancy's not wrong, but it's gotta hurt Ned's feelings. The game skips ahead to nighttime here. Now that I'm thinking about it, this is so weird. Why does Nancy wait hours before calling the Hardy Boys? Why is she locked inside the cafe on this night? Why go through all the trouble of switching to night for such a brief phone call? The call starts with Joe pretending to be Frank. They know exactly who can help Nancy. Special Agent Zane Garrett. He'll send Nancy a copy of the Degas file for Adela's necklace. But the file is too complex for phones. Nancy needs a computer to read the file. I've complained a lot about this elsewhere, but I think it is dumb that the game forces Nancy to go through so many hoops just to get the Degas file. It's 3 pictures. Seriously, it is not that much of a problem. Ugh. Here, Frank says you should be able to get it later today, but it's more like a day and a half, at least, because Nancy's distracted by the puppet shows. I like how the conversation ends with Joe name-dropping the Hardy Boys DS game, Treasure on the Tracks. That's a cute reference. Since we're at the end of the first day, let me change gears for a moment and talk about interface stuff. This is the stuff I was going to talk about at the start of the video during the tutorial, but that would have been way boring. Nancy's journal is fine. It functions like the journal and character notes in other games. It's hard to scroll through the journal, which is a problem because all new journal entries appear at the bottom, so you have to scroll to see them. That's not a problem for me because I normally ignore the journal. The journal doesn't get updated during the final hour of the game, so I must not be the only one who ignores it. The map screen is pretty useless. It shows where you are on the map unless you're inside a building, which is most of the time. You can click on the bookmark for the postcard tab, which you only need to do if you're completing the annoyingly precise photograph achievement. Nancy's phone is fine. My issue is with the task list. If I can repeat my everything wrong with video for a moment, it's super annoying that the game forces you to check off every subtask on the right-hand side before you can check off the task on the left-hand side. That was a bad interface decision. When a task is completed, players should be able to mark it as done. No extra steps to do before then. I really like how the game has classic navigation and modern navigation. I struggled a lot when playing the game in classic mode. Finding the arrows is tough in some places. Often, Nancy jumps to places that don't make sense, like I expect her to walk in a straight line, but instead she jumps to the left or right. For example, if you go directly straight out of the cafe, Nancy does not walk forward to the food stalls. She curves to the right towards the Marionette theater. This is especially bad in the tunnels area. On the very first step, Nancy jumps all the way forward to the corner and turns 90 degrees to the left. So she's facing a different direction and a different tunnel from the one that players just saw. That's confusing. Turning around in a circle is weird. In the old games, it takes 8 turns of equal distance to spin in a circle. Here, it depends on where you're standing. I tried it in the cafe. I quickly found places where it takes 6 turns to spin around because 2 of the turns are larger than the others. I know, that's a lot of complaints about classic mode navigation. It's not so bad that you can't use it. It was a good idea to implement a new control scheme after all the complaints people had about the controls in Midnight in Salem. I just wish the classic control mode was better. As for modern control mode, it's pretty good. There's something really fun about making Nancy run through the courtyards. I love it when she runs up and down stairs. I don't get stuck in corners as often as I do when I play other games with similar control schemes, so that's good. I don't like the inventory. I'm not sure if the problem is that the inventory is too small or if the items look too similar, but at a glance, I can't tell the rectangular gray block from the rectangular gray paper from the rectangular gray book. When the inventory becomes full towards the end of the game, scrolling through the inventory to find the right item becomes a problem. The slider bar does not work as smoothly as it did in previous games. The items are sorted according to when Nancy first received them. That's fine, except for the snow globe and the screwdriver, which are items you get at the very start, but you don't use them until the very end, so this forces players to inventory scroll for them. I should note the inventory is way better than it was in Midnight in Salem. That's true for the game in general. Even the flawed parts are an improvement. The ability to rotate inventory items has returned. 90% of the time, you have to left-click to rotate items. There are a few puzzles where you right-click to rotate items. Every time that happened, I got stuck because I didn't know the controls changed. It is cruel of the game to train players left-click is rotate for several hours. Then suddenly, we get right-click rotations. I thought that element was badly done. If you watched my first playthrough of the game, you probably saw I got stuck on all the puzzles where you must rotate pieces, like the book in the Alchemy lab and the crown at the end. I had no idea what to do. They should have stuck with left-click as rotate for the entire game. If they absolutely had to introduce right-click as rotate in certain places, They should have done it like Warnings at Waverly Academy and other Nancy Drew games, which have a big question mark appear in the corner to explain the special controls for this puzzle. In the game's defense, there are pop-ups in the lower right, which explain the controls. I didn't notice them at all. Part of the problem is that they're too small. They're smaller than the inventory icons even. It's easy to miss them. Another problem is that we have a pop-up, which is press escape to back away. That appears every single time you zoom in on anything. So after the first 20 times, I was trained to completely ignore the pop-ups. They're useless. You don't need to pay attention to them. If the pop-ups only appeared for the puzzles with special controls, like in the earlier Nancy Drew games, then they would be more noticeable. Another problem is that it's not obvious what the pop-ups mean. One is a picture of a square with a triangle and a dotted line. I can't tell what it means just by looking at it. I think it's trying to say left-click to rotate an item. I would redo that picture so it's easier to interpret. I especially got stuck on the crown puzzle, where you left-click to rotate the crown and right-click to rotate gems. It's confusing to have left-click to rotate next to right-click to rotate. I'm sorry. Another common pop-up is use the scroll button to zoom in on small items. That's fine, but at the same time, they could have just made the items and text large enough to see. Then you wouldn't need to zoom in on things to see them. I have similar thoughts on the read button in the upper right. Players wouldn't need a separate way to read text if the text was easily legible to begin with. If you're playing on a lower resolution, though, the read button becomes extremely necessary. Back to the actual gameplay. Sorry, I talked for the tutorial stuff for like 10 minutes. The second day of the game is far less open-ended than the first day. On day 1, you could do your 5 tasks in pretty much any order. Here on day 2, nope. You have to talk to Patricia, talk to Leo, talk to Elka and Merrick, and talk to Radek in that order. At the start of the second day, Patricia tells Nancy she can get a laptop from Operat Computers. Patricia doesn't know much about Vladena, other than Vladena usually ignores other people. Patricia loves the crown jewels, but warns the lines will be terribly long once they're put on display. They only get put on display for special occasions. What is the special occasion that's being celebrated now? Patricia asks you to deliver a coffee to Father Leo before you leave. Nancy won't leave until you talk to him. Father Leo is a kindly old man who serves as the sympathetic kidnapping victim. He only appears here and at the end of the game, so he doesn't get much character development. That's fine. He loves his cat in a card game called Marioche. The conversation makes it seem like Nancy's going to play Marioche, and it's going to be just as good as Scopa from Game 18. Sadly, collecting all the hidden Marioche cards gets you an achievement, and nothing else. You never get to play it. Leo is concerned when Nancy tells him about the theft of Adela's necklace. He decides to double-check on the museum security. He says you can meet him in his office later. Visit Leo's office later is added to Nancy's task list. And this one really frustrates me. It's another one of those moments that pretty much all first-time players get stuck on, because the game comes to a grinding halt unless you go to the office at a very specific time. Namely, right after Radek tells you Alka is like his kid sister. Who heard Radek say that and thought, whoa, that means I should visit Leo's office now? Answer, no one. No one thought that. The problem could have been avoided if there was something to indicate when to visit Leo's office. Here are 3 solutions I thought of. Number 1, have Nancy say, I should check in on Leo at the right time. Number 2, have something appear on the hints when it's the right time. Number 3, change the task. So instead of saying, visit Leo's office later, it says, visit Leo's office at night. Oh, I thought of a 4th solution. Don't make this a time-specific challenge to begin with. Make it so Nancy can visit Leo's office at any time before the end of the day. That would have worked just fine. It's not like the conversation at Leo's office is time-sensitive. Speaking of things that frustrate me on this day of the game, this is the day the haunted tour starts at the museum. To start the tour, you have to click on the sign. This is another interface problem. It's not obvious. Click on the sign is the way to trigger this section. Players know the game has nighttime and daytime segments. I don't blame anybody who thought you have to wait until nighttime to take the nighttime tour. That's far more intuitive than click on a sign to time travel to this same location. This came up when I tested the game. I knew I had to do the tour because it's on the task list, but I could not figure out where the tour was for the life of me. I didn't figure it out. I had to be told what to do. I would have added a hint to that task to make it more obvious what to do. When you finish talking to Leo, there's a brief scene of Radek picking up a coffee and leaving a flyer on the counter. Radek, there is a rack for holding flyers. Put your flyer there. To reach Operat Computers, you have to go through the doorway at the end of the plaza. This takes you to the courtyard with the famous clock. This is a neat location, although I'm told in real life there are always hundreds of people here, not like 5. Operat is basically the only location that matters in this plaza. Like, if they put Operat in the corner of the other plaza, there would be no reason to visit this clock plaza, ever. I actually might have liked it better if they put Operat closer to the cafe, then there'd be less back and forth between two plazas. I think the computer store looks fine. I really like Elka's design, and she would be my crush in this game, except she's secretly super evil, so I guess Adela will have to be my video game crush. Elka is studying computers and cybersecurity, which makes sense. She owns a computer store. Elka says her grandfather repairs puppets for Radek. She has a little crush on Radek, but doesn't know what to say around him. I think her crush is cute, and they would be a good couple, except she's super evil, like I said. I'm pretty sure there's a rule against dating someone who blackmails you into committing crimes. Nancy asks Elka for a laptop with lots of storage space. Elka gives Nancy the laptop, no questions asked. She doesn't get Nancy's credit card info, and she doesn't force Nancy to do chores first. Nice! The only problem is that the laptop needs a charger. Elka says you can easily get one in an internet cafe. It's actually not that easy. If you go to the cafe and get the charger, the game refuses to let you use it on the laptop. This annoys me, but not as much as it annoys other people. Why can't Nancy use the laptop right away? It was yesterday when the Hardys told Nancy a secret agent would be messaging her soon. She should check her email immediately, instead of waiting until night. If you go to the cafe, you can click on the charger. Nancy won't pick it up. She just says, huh. Like Elka didn't tell her she needs to get the charger. The collectible side of Operat is pretty neat looking. Merrick runs this part of the shop. I like Merrick. I think he gives the strongest emotional performance out of all the characters in the game. I don't know what a Czech accent sounds like in real life, but I get the feeling he has the most authentic accent of the entire cast. He instantly identifies Nancy's key as one of the 7 keys. It still strikes me as weird. Nobody makes a big deal out of this. A random tourist should not be carrying a historical artifact that belongs to the president. Merrick tells you to watch the Marionette show to learn about the 7 keys. He says when you come back, he'll tell you what he learned from the key, free of charge. This doesn't happen. There is no conversation where Merrick tells you what he learned from the key. Why did he even say that? Merrick mentions that Elka's mother died some time ago. When you leave the shop, Radek enters to ask about puppet number 12. Right after this, both their phones ring at the same time. Presumably, this is code for, did you get new instructions from our blackmailers? Or maybe it's a Residente code? The game isn't clear on this point. Radek turns around and pressures Nancy into seeing his Marionette show. Joke's on you, Radek. Nancy was already going to visit the show to check out Elka's crush. I get the sense Radek is supposed to be the cute boy character of the game, who's popular with fans. He's fairly funny and awkward. When I played the game, everybody started calling him Banana Shirt because his shirt is yellow. Nobody was crushing on him. Radek looks fine here, although his hands look about 20 years older than he does. When he's standing outside at the Marionette Theater, the shadows make him look creepy and bad. I'm not sure why. He seems to be the only character in the game with this problem. Radek says his assistant didn't show up today, and Nancy volunteers to help put on the show. This leads to the Marionette puzzle, which is universally disliked. I think I'd like it if the puzzle was just 3 rounds long, but it's 7 rounds. If only Amateur Sleuth Mode had a shorter version of the puzzle. Or perhaps a version of the puzzle without props? The goal of the puzzle is to set up each frame with a puppet, a line of dialogue, and a prop. Radek has notes on the left, which kind of help. Radek's first note is King greets everyone. It's fairly easy to see the only line of dialogue there is, "Good day to all of you, I am King Maria Theresa," which also tells us which puppet says the line. Simple, right? Well, wrong! Radek's last note in Scene 1 is King holds the crown. The last frame of Scene 1 is the scribe holding the scroll. How is that King holds the crown? Radek has other notes that don't quite fit the puzzle. I'm not sure if this was a mistake on the part of the developers, or if they purposely made Radek's notes strange so the puzzle would be harder. Could be either one. For example, Scene 3 is missing notes for frames 2 and 5, but the notes have a blank line where note 3 should go, so players incorrectly assume that's the line, which doesn't have a note. Another example, a note in Scene 4 is "Help the people?" 2 different lines end with those 3 words. Another example, the last note of Scene 6 is the word "keys." I misunderstood that as referring to the prop. Guess and check is pretty crucial to solving the puzzle. After you set up all the frames, you press the action button. If a frame is correct, it's green. If it's close to correct, it's yellow. If it's totally off base, it's red. You can fix the incorrect frames and try again. If you get super stuck, you can try every combination of puppet, prop, and dialogue until you land on the right ones. I have done that. It's a pain, but it works. Maria is on stage the whole time, although the person she's talking to changes a few times. The scribe is a pesky character because he leaves the play, returns to say a single line, then leaves again. He does that twice. Really, I don't understand why the scribe delivers the final line of the play. It would make way more sense if one of the 3 on-stage characters delivered that line. I think the developers trapped themselves in a corner with this puzzle, because it's followed by the Marionette show. They couldn't really go back and change the puzzle, because the show animation was already completed. If they changed the puzzle, it would no longer match the show. There are some discrepancies between the show and the puzzle, like how Maria wears the crown in Scene 1, Frame 1, but the puzzle solution said she had no crown. I feel like I've nitpicked this puzzle enough. As I said, a 3-scene variation of the puzzle would have been better. It also would have made the Marionette show a bit more interesting to players, because they wouldn't know the entire script ahead of time. It's boring to go through a script line by line, and then you get to see 3.5 minutes of the same script line by line. Oh, one final nitpick. The Marionette show was divided into 3 acts. I don't know why. Maybe that was something which was going to be part of the puzzle, but it was removed. Radek greets the audience before and after the show, much to the delight of everyone except the gray-haired man who sits in place and doesn't move. The game jumps ahead to nighttime, where Radek tells Nancy the legend of the 7 keys is true. The 7 keys are needed to open the vault where the crown jewels are kept. To steal the crown jewels, someone would either have to steal all 7 keys or make duplicates. This is why it should be a big deal. Nancy has one of the 7 keys. Radek says he does Marionette shows, in part because he wants to keep Czech culture alive. The conversation ends with Nancy mentioning Elka. Radek has no romantic interest in her. So much for that relationship. As I complained earlier, the game expects players to magically know this is the time to visit Leo's office. You must go there now. Leo's office is closed. Nancy overhears Oscar arguing with Leo's secretary. The secretary doesn't care that Oscar is the director and curator of the Gems exhibit. He thinks Oscar has no legitimate business with the museum and should be kept away from Leo at all times. I'm not sure why the secretary thinks Oscar is a nuisance that should be gotten rid of. Oscar is in charge of museum security, unless he was lying about that when he talked to Nancy. Oscar definitely should be allowed to talk to Leo about the security. Leo promised to tell Nancy about the security. It's weird that, he's okay with telling Nancy, but not okay with telling Oscar when Oscar's literal job is protecting the jewels. After this scene, Frank Hardy sends Nancy a text saying the Degas file was emailed to her. I don't know why Frank is the one who's monitoring Nancy's emails, but whatever. Nancy can finally check her email. The email says it was sent by Zane at 5:52 a.m. Nancy should have gotten this email a long time ago, but she refused to use her computer then. Nancy can now pick up the charger from the cafe. It is easy to miss that picking up the charger closes the doors of the cafe. The game doesn't let you leave until you read the email. I'm not sure why. The game does force you into a loading screen once the challenge is done, so maybe that has something to do with it? Use the charger on the laptop, then click on the email icon. You need to enter the Wi-Fi password from the wall. And really, this should be the point in the game where Nancy finds the Wi-Fi password, not at the very start. It would be cool if we could read Nancy's other emails, but in this case, all you can do is download the Degas attachment. The file downloads, it appears on the desktop. When Nancy clicks on the attachment, she is forced to do a CAPTCHA challenge. I have a feeling that this was made up for the game, because as far as I know, you never have to do a CAPTCHA to open a picture that's already on your desktop. I like this challenge. You make a complete picture by swapping tiles. I prefer this snowy mountain picture to the pink cloud picture that you do later on. When you're about halfway done, there's a jump scare! A puppet monster jumps out at you! Ah! Patricia says it's the puppet of death. She tells you to get the laptop fixed at Operat, and mentions that the internet security company here is named Lukaji, or Puppeteers. Coincidence? Nancy goes to Elka's. Once you enter the courtyard, the game locks you in. You can't save your game or switch control modes until the next day of the game. I don't know why. I find it weird that there are 15-minute sections where you can't save the game. Maybe there's a good programming reason behind that limitation. There's a pretty nice scene of Elka and Nancy walking through the desk. It would be neat if the game had more scenes of characters moving, instead of them standing in place all the time, but it's probably super hard to animate. Elka promises to check out your computer. She asks to have your phone, too. Nancy is far too trusting here. Maybe she's distracted because this is a good chance to snoop. It doesn't matter that she has no reason to suspect Elka or Merrick yet. Nancy is still going to go through all their stuff. In Elka's area, there's a paper on cybersecurity and a computer that's not password protected. That's bad cybersecurity, Elka. Elka is looking up flights to Rome. The first entry in her spreadsheet is selling an empty, used laptop for about $5,000. So is that Nancy's laptop or what? Elka has a purple pen that you can spin around in circles. There's a picture of Elka and her mom. Turn it around and undo the tabs to see the back of the picture. Someone wrote, "I know it wasn't an accident." It's super dramatic. In Merrick's area, there's a ledger that says Adela visited his store. Presumably they did this to justify Merrick being included on the suspect list. He keeps his will and testament from 18 years ago on his work desk for some reason. It says Elka inherits everything as his only relative. I can't think of a reason why the game thinks players need to know this information. Move Merrick's paper aside for keys. Use them to unlock the box in his drawer. It has Easter eggs inside. This is the weird Easter egg where the game doesn't accept it unless you've done the Sunny June coffee Easter egg first. What an arbitrary requirement. This snooping section is okay. I wish there were more interesting or relevant things to be found in Merrick's area. When you find everything in both places, Elka returns and says your devices are safe to use. Nancy claims the puppet pop-up appeared right after she downloaded a file, which is not quite accurate, but close enough. I don't know why she calls it a pop-up, because that's not how I'd describe that picture. Nancy refuses to say what she was downloading. Elka says she wears a ring with a built-in taser, which is the sort of conversation that would make me back away slowly. She makes you do a computer security-themed game called Cyberblock. You have to move all over the board, you want to push the orange blocks aside and pick up the green pieces. Get all of them and reach the exit before you run out of turns. This is a fun puzzle that I like. It's probably the best puzzle in the first half of the game. What are the other ones? Coffee and marionettes? Yeah, best puzzle in the first half of the game. A problem is that there are no hints for the puzzle. If you get stuck, you're on your own. When Nancy finishes 2 rounds, Agent Zane calls. Nancy puts him on speaker. Okay, now Nancy is being far too trusting. Secret agents should not be put on speakerphones in front of suspects. Again, the conversation about the computer here doesn't match what actually happened with the computer earlier. Zane asks Nancy, "Did you get the file open?" She says, "I did." Which is wrong. She did not. Later, Nancy says, "When I downloaded the first file, I got a pop-up and a virus." First file? What's the second file? Zane claims the Degas file tracks the location history of the gems and necklace, with time-stamped entries to record when the necklace changed custody. That does not match the Degas file that Nancy gets later on. So why is this conversation so off? Was it taken from an earlier draft of the script or something? Zane and Elka are confident that things will work out the next time Nancy downloads the Degas file. That happens in about 20 minutes. Again, I don't understand why Nancy can't check her email right away. The conversation makes it clear, hey, the email's ready, you can get it now. But she waits 20 minutes. Elka walks Nancy to the door when a dark shadow passes by. I assume it was the ghost knight, but it's definitely not clear enough to see anything. The shadow drops a threatening note, and Elka is surprisingly scared. She locks the door behind Nancy, which is so rude. I wish we could talk to Elka about these events later on. The game skips to the next day, which starts with a call from Ned. I don't know why he starts with, "I wish I had better news." Like Nancy's father just died or something. No, his news is that Second Shine is a perfectly legitimate company, and Hans should be taken off the suspect list. I already figured Hans was innocent because he's not important enough to get his own phone icon. When Nancy asks how Ned is doing, he talks about her podcast. Wait, what podcast? Ned begs Nancy to call him more often. It's weird that he's so insistent she should call him, when every time you do try to call him, he doesn't answer the phone. What Ned should say is, "Please call me, but not anytime, only at a time that's important to the plot." Adela calls right after Ned. She wants an update on the investigation. Bad news, Adela. All Nancy did yesterday was look at an email and play with puppets. The negative reviews for this game usually mention the latte art, the NPCs, and Nancy's voice. Apparently, she sounds like some TikTok person I've never heard of. I think Nancy's voice is fine. In general, the end of this conversation is the place where Nancy's voice gets on my nerves. I don't know why this part grates on me. It kind of sounds like Nancy's voice actress recorded each line on a separate day without any context, so it sounds unnatural. Not helping is the fact that Nancy is saying the same basic thing over and over. "I know you're anxious, but we can't rush this. I understand, and we don't have time to waste, but investigation requires patience. I will move as swiftly as I can." That's the Nancy conversation that annoys me. Well, that and the part at the end where she gets shouty out of nowhere, but I think I don't like that because I don't like being shouted at, that's all. The rest of the time, I think Nancy's voice acting is fine. Adela says she visited Operat, so Nancy pledges to add them to the suspect list. She doesn't. Instead, her tasks for the day are investigate Vladena and the Marionette Theater. This is another place where I don't understand the logic behind when the game expects you to do things. Why couldn't Nancy have looked into Vladena the previous day? Why look into the Marionette Theater now? Well, it's because now the Marionette Theater is open. It's the green cart that Radek stands in front of. Inside is a script, which doesn't quite match the script from the puppet puzzle. The clipboard has a list of marionettes, along with a huge donation from Luke Kaji. The puppet company likes puppeteers. Who knew? Use the chisel on the toolbox to find a script about the Residente. Nancy immediately knows this is a super important group, and she needs to ask every possible character about Residente before she can proceed to the next day of the game. Nancy, you're getting really distracted from the jewel theft mystery. Nancy asks Radek about his puppets. Why did he ask Merrick about puppet 12 if there's only 10 puppets? Radek makes a flimsy excuse, which is obviously false, and we never hear about the topic again. I checked. It is necessary to ask Radek how many puppets he has. You cannot progress to the next day of the game unless you have this fairly pointless conversation. Vladena is now standing in the back part of her shop. She makes a fake offer to get you coffee, which is the most villainous thing she could do. She thinks Merrick's repair shop is tacky, and she says no one could crack her safe. Oscar appears, and he conveniently distracts Vladena so Nancy can crack the safe. What excellent timing! Oscar and Vladena have a mumbled conversation outside. I kind of wish we could hear the conversation clearly. Vladena later says they argued because he refuses to let her investigate the gems for the museum display. He is the museum director, so I understand why he's the one investigating the gems. The safe puzzle is tough, and part of the difficulty is that it's unclear what you're supposed to do in order to solve the puzzle. There are about 5 different steps, but Vladena's notes have them all out of order, along with some unrelated information, like figure out carat size of size 7 diamond ring, which has 4 prongs, round cut with sharper edges. That feels like puzzle information, but it's completely irrelevant. I'm pretty sure I fell for the ring's false clues the first time I played the game. This puzzle was my stopping point when I tested the game. I was already close to being done for the day, and this puzzle fried my brain. Vladena has 3 pages of notes. Maybe they should have been labeled page 1, 2, and 3 to make it more obvious what to do. Personally, I would have condensed them all from 3 pages to 1 page. Pages 2 and 3 are mostly taken up with color diagrams of the fan blades, which is unnecessary because the blades are already colored. Players don't need to be told the pink circle is pink, right? It would also help if the 3 reference papers were on the same desk as the puzzle. That way players wouldn't have to keep going back and forth between the 2 desks saying, wait, what am I doing? What's the next step? The first step is to find 3 fan blades. One is inside the pencil holder. The other 2 are in different spots depending on which difficulty setting you're on. Use the fan blades on each other for a puzzle. Rotate the blades until they're in the right spots. There is a straight line which goes through all 3 of them. Also, the gray portions of the blades are covered up when they're in the right spots. Next, you put the completed fan on Vladena's magazine, and you find the spot where the equations on the fan are correct. This is the part I take issue with, because the correct equation is 4.5 times 3 times 4 minus 9 equals 7.5 times 6. I can usually do math in my head, but not when it's 6 numbers, including 2 decimals. I can't be the only one who gave up here. I would have had a much simpler equation, like 4 times 3 minus 9. They should have had an amateur sleuth version of the puzzle with easier math. Instead, the difference between the 2 modes is that Master Sleuth has the added step of rotating the fan so it's facing the right direction. No, add the difficulty change on the hardest step, not one of the easy ones. The next step is to take the tick marks. This puzzle is complicated enough. I would have left this step out, or I would have made it Master Sleuth only. Vladena's papers explain how tick mark math works. They basically determine whether you want the digit in the ones place, the tens place, or the decimal place. So now you have a number associated with each of the 4 holes. Vladena's first paper assigns a symbol to each hole. Her safe has those 4 symbols written on it. Enter the numbers in the correct order, which is 5457. Then spin the handle to open the safe. Finally, we're done here. The safe has Vladena's appraisal certificate for the necklace. I'm not sure why she locked it up, like it's super valuable. Vladena is surprised to see you open the safe. She doesn't think Oscar should be a suspect, but she admits he had an opportunity to tamper with the necklace and the log. She left him alone in the store with both of them for a while, before the fake gems were discovered. That is a much better reason to suspect Oscar than the original reason that he was part of the museum crew 20 years ago. After Nancy leaves the building, she says, I should compare this file Vladena gave me with the version on Degas. That is, Nancy tells players what to do next. This happens a lot in the older games, and it works perfectly fine here. It also works when Nancy does it before the night trap puzzle. In fact, it works so well, I wish she did this a lot more in the game. I just complained a lot about the safe puzzle. Some verbal cues would have helped with that. Just like before, Nancy has to go to the cafe, pick up the charger, and use it on her laptop. She has to complete another picture puzzle to open the Degas file. Agent Zane said, quote, "The Degas file tracks the location history of the gems and necklace. Pay special attention to the timestamp entries. They record when the necklace changed custody." None of that is in the Degas file. There is nothing about who had the necklace and when. Instead, we get 3 pages signed by Hans. They have client names on them. None of the clients are Adela. Why are they in Adela's file? They have nothing to do with her. The 4th page is basically a copy of Vladena's paper with the same information in different spots. Like half of the gem description was moved to the comments section. Nancy has a puzzle to identify the matching parts. You click on the part of the Degas file, then click on its counterpart on the log. When you find all 8 matches, Nancy notes everything is the same, except the date. Vladena wrote Sunday, March 5th, but the Degas file says it was Thursday, March 3rd. One of those 2 dates is flat out wrong, because Thursday is not 2 days before Sunday. Nancy could easily look at a calendar to determine which date is correct, but she doesn't. Nancy confronts Vladena. Vladena complains she tried to update the obviously wrong date on Degas, but they wouldn't let her. She still seems mad about that, but then again, she seems mad about everything. Vladena tries to look innocent by saying she's responsible for Nancy being hired. After she heard Nancy on the podcast, she insisted Nancy be brought to investigate. Why is Nancy suddenly a big podcast person? Seriously, it's a little weird to casually reference that Nancy's a podcast star when none of the other games have mentioned podcasts. Too bad they didn't include a snippet of the podcast as an endgame bonus. Nancy gets a text from the Hardys telling her to call Agent Zane. I would rather call the Hardys than Agent Zane, but sadly, calling the Hardy Boys was a one-time only thing. Nancy calls Zane, who promises to look into Residente. He's surprised to hear Vladena wrote a physical log. As we saw, it's pretty redundant to do a log and a Degas entry. Nancy thinks Vladena messed up the Degas file because she's bad with computers. This is coming from someone who took 2 days to get an email. Zane says there's black market chatter, indicating the crown jewels will be stolen. The jewels have biometric security, meaning one of the key holders must be physically present in order to open the door. Nancy quickly realizes Leo has been kidnapped by the villains, so they can bypass the door security. Whoa, talk about jumping to conclusions there, Nancy. Leo is the most likely target, since he's the only key holder that Nancy knows. I mean, he's the most likely target, since he's leaving town for a few days. Nancy says his office has no security. She walked right in. That's a lie. Nancy's never been inside Leo's office before, and there is a security camera in the hallway. Actually, Nancy's next step is visiting Leo's office for the first time. Leo's secretary is never there. He's always gone on a break whenever Nancy arrives. If you check his "Be Right Back" sign, you get his phone number. He's actually fairly nice and helpful when you call. I have no idea why he thinks Nancy is great, but Oscar is a menace. The secretary freely admits he lies to Oscar. He also gets rid of people by pretending not to speak Czech. This guy sounds like a terrible secretary. Unless you want a secretary who keeps everyone away from you. Leo seems nice enough. I don't know why he hired such a jerk secretary. You get to search both offices here. Just like searching Apparat, there's nothing of interest outside of the desk area. The scenery is mostly bookshelves and small statues that reappear in the vault at the end of the game. If you look at the secretary's computer, Nancy says, "Looks like he and Oscar have a history." I don't know why she says that. The secretary's computer shows his most recent web search was for Oscar. The first result is Oscar's Europage account. Let me guess, he's friends with Corrine from Mornings at Waverly Academy, and that's the real reason why the secretary doesn't trust him. There's a ticket for Leo's flight to Rome, which is 11:35 on Tuesday. That's today, right? I guess that means the game started on Saturday night. Use the paper cutter on the envelope. You get Leo's instructions for taking care of his cat, Mariash. He named his cat after his favorite card game. There's also a Mariash card here. Collect all the hidden cards for an achievement. I think that's a good challenge. The next door is Leo's actual office. When you enter, the door closes behind Nancy. She overhears Oscar arguing with the secretary because the secretary lied about setting up an appointment. Secretary says, "Oh, it's too late. Leo's already out of the country," and they inspected the crown jewels without Oscar. I wonder who did the actual inspection. Ladana and Oscar are quite clear only an expert gemologist could have done the inspection. Leo's desk is a boring area to search. He has a calendar with nothing important on it. There's a paper, which doesn't matter until later, and 2 long phone messages saying the crown jewel inspection happened last week at the request of the president. Why didn't Leo's secretary say that to Oscar? Why bother making up lies about the inspection when you can honestly say, "Oh, the inspection already happened. Blame the president." There is a puzzle on the wall. I hate this puzzle. It is bad. The basic puzzle idea is something we've seen in previous games, a lot like the bento box puzzle from Shadow at the Water's Edge. You need to place all the tiles on the board while following all of the clues. It's simple enough. The problem is that they messed up on the clues, so the puzzle's unsolvable. Specifically, they messed up on the crown tiles. There are 4 different ways to place tokens on the board which meet the requirements. The game only accepts 1 of the 4 correct solutions. I got so stuck on my first playthrough because I had a correct solution, but the game would not accept it, and I could not for the life of me figure out where I made a mistake. I was relieved when I learned I didn't make a mistake. It's the game's fault. They got their own puzzle wrong. It's really bad they got a puzzle solution wrong in a puzzle-heavy game like this. I hope they update the game to fix the broken puzzle. The easiest fix would be to add a shape to one of the crowns in the lower right clue. I don't know how hard it would be to add this change, since the puzzle is technically part of the scenery of the room. Speaking of which, I noticed there are 3 blank spaces in the upper right wall design. Were they originally going to have a clue for the puzzle there? Another problem with the puzzle is that the swords and crosses look too similar. I played on the highest resolution, and I still mixed those symbols up. Anybody playing on a lower resolution was probably out of luck. When you solve the puzzle, Nancy sees a bookcase is moved, and Leo's cat is free. The cat is pretty cute, most cats are. The game autosaves when you click on the cat, which can be taken as a clue that there's an achievement for petting the cat in multiple locations. Since the main door is shut, Nancy leaves the office through the hidden passageway. She goes down a staircase to hidden tunnels. A card and a set of footprints at the base of the stairs makes it look like the culprit entered Leo's room through the wall, then brought Leo here. Nancy sees smoke in some of the tunnels ahead. She decides she has to get out quickly. She's in danger. I still don't know why she can't turn around and go up the staircase she just used. That's the safest exit. There's a puzzle where Nancy has to go through the tunnels and find the exit. The whole time she's being chased by the ghost knight. This is a cool premise for a puzzle. Definitely a scary scene. I think it needs some tweaking, though. I just checked my first playthrough. I picked up the dropped card from the ground, and I died instantly, with no idea what the heck just happened. It looks like the screen gets dark, and Nancy dies for no reason. Players won't know what's going on unless they turn around and see the knight approach. I've seen comments from people who didn't see the knight exhibit in the museum, so they were incredibly confused by this tunnel chase. It's hard to recognize the villain as a knight, since the screen is so dark and it's covered with shadowy fog. As we see later, the knight is really cool looking. Why did they cover it up here? I think the knight should have been visible in this scene, and when it dropped the threatening page outside Operat. That way players would instantly know it's the villain from earlier, it's back with murderous intent. As I said before, the classic mode navigation in the tunnels is pretty bad. This area was clearly meant to be explored in modern mode. The correct exit is a closed door. You can tell it's correct because your cursor changes when you hover over it. I think the exit door should have been open. To make it more obvious, it's the exit. As it is, there are 4 identical doors in this area. There's no way to tell which one is right, except by guessing until you get the right one. I do want to repeat, this is a cool puzzle that I like. An underground tunnel chase is classic Nancy Drew. When Nancy leaves the tunnels, she automatically calls the police. She reports that Leo may have been kidnapped. The officer promises to send somebody to Leo's workplace and home. He warns Nancy to stay away from the underground tunnels since they flood. Nancy asks if they can check to see if Leo took a different flight from Prague to Rome. I don't know why she thinks this is something that should be looked into. Is there a reason to believe he took a different flight? The police promise to call you back when they have something to report. This is a lie. The truth is that Nancy needs to call the police back after nighttime starts. Once again, there is nothing to indicate when you have to do this. The game expects players to magically know when the phone call should happen. I feel bad for players who got stuck because they expected the police to call Nancy back like they said they would. Adela left you a text message saying to meet at the cafe. Adela has a laptop which looks identical to Nancy's laptop. She says her computer crashed after a scary pop-up. Nancy asks to do 3 more rounds of cyberblock to fix it. I like this puzzle the second time as much as I did the first time. It is admittedly a little weird that Adela comes to Nancy with this problem instead of going to Elka. Nancy says she has an update on the case. I thought the update would be about the Degas file. Nancy spent a lot of time getting it. But no, Nancy's update is completely different. She says the culprit stole Adela's necklace as a dry run for stealing the crown jewels. Why does she think this? She's right, but that's making some pretty big assumptions. Nancy somehow knows the culprit doesn't have any of the 7 keys yet. That strikes me as a major flaw in the culprit's plan. They kidnapped Leo to get past door number 2 when they don't have the keys for door number 1. Adela says King Leopold II's alchemist made the original keys in his workshop. The plans could still be there. Finding the alchemy lab is Nancy's next big task. You can talk to Patricia for new conversations, but she has nothing important to say. You can talk to Elka too. Her conversation is so important, I'm surprised it's optional, especially compared to some of the conversations that aren't optional. Elka talks about her mother's death. She was hit by a car at night. Her grandfather has always refused to say anything about the incident besides for she was doing an errand. What errand, Merrick? Why are you so secretive? I occasionally see Nancy Drew fans make mean jokes about Shadow at the Water's Edge, where Nancy is very rude and won't stop asking invasive personal questions about a dead mother. I feel like the developers tried to counteract that by having Nancy be extra compassionate and sympathetic here. There's nothing to indicate your next task is to go to Merrick's. He has an alchemy trunk out on display now. Don't know why he put it out just now, whatever. He says it's about 500 years old and he doesn't know how to open it. He tells Nancy not to worry about Residente, and he complains that Elka isn't interested in what he knows. Nancy says it's okay, just spending quality time with Elka should be enough to help her. And again, Nancy's kind of getting involved in the personal business of strangers. The first part of the trunk puzzle is fun. You need to find a hidden button on the left side and another one on the right. It's easy enough, I have to wonder why Merrick couldn't figure it out. Did you even try, Merrick? Then again, I would not have found the buttons if the cursor did not change when you go over them. When you press the side buttons, 8 buttons pop out in the front. You need to press them all in the correct order. Classic Nancy Drew puzzle. The box opens up. Nancy says, "Let's take a look," then tosses the marionette that's on top. It's 500 years old! Don't just throw it away, Nancy! Nancy sees an alchemy symbol carved on the inside of the box. She wonders if she's seen it before. This brings us to the puzzle of opening Oscar's artifact. The first step is to open the lid. There's an exhibit in the museum which mentions Kepler's laws of interplanetary motion. The idea is to recreate them on the lid. I don't really understand how they match, if I'm being honest. Kepler's first law is that the orbit of a planet is an ellipse with the sun. How is that the clue for making a circle? Wait. Okay, so I double checked. It turns out I was wrong. The solution has nothing to do with recreating Kepler's laws of motion. The solution is totally different. Look at the exhibit about Kepler's 3 laws. The bold letters in the book say first circle, then ellipses. That's how you solve the puzzle. First you do a circle, then an ellipse. You have to click on the sun between the 2 steps or the solution is wrong. I don't know why you move the sun. It's also wrong if you do a counterclockwise orbit. I'm guessing this is one of the puzzles people are thinking about when they complain it's not clear what you have to do in order to solve the puzzle. When you solve the puzzle, a bunch of symbols appear on the side of the artifact. You want to select the 4 correct symbols, then press C at the bottom. The strategy guide tells me C stands for Casper Lemon. Am I supposed to recognize that name? The glass poem on Vladena's wall is the guide for this puzzle. It says where to find the 4 symbols, but it's not too difficult to find them on your own. They all come with a big letter R on the outside of a building. The strategy guide says the R stands for Rudolph II. I totally thought it was Residente. Maybe I should have been following the strategy guide all along. It seems to have some insider information that's not in the game. Or maybe I'm just dumb, because I could not find the 4th symbol, no matter how hard I looked. People in my live stream chat were shouting, "Check the marionette near Radek!" And I still couldn't do it. The marionette is behind the stage. It doesn't appear until this part of the game. I'm sure the developers did that to prevent players from solving the puzzle too early. You can solve it on the first day of the game if you know the combination. Nothing special happens if you solve it early, but it'll make you feel smart. The correct combination is King's Orb, number 8, Eagle coat of arms, and skeleton holding a birdcage. The artifact opens up, revealing 3 gems. One of them has the same alchemy symbol as Merrick's trunk. Oscar is surprised Nancy opened the artifact. He says it's over 1,000 years old, far older than any of the clues that were used to open it. Oscar says he'll examine the artifact privately and enter the jewels into Degas, but he doesn't. He leaves them out in the open. Don't forget to wave goodbye to Oscar here, because he doesn't appear again for the rest of the game. There is a puzzle to distract Oscar, so Nancy can steal the jewels, because of course she's going to steal valuable artifacts from a museum. Distract someone so you can do stuff in their area is a classic Nancy Drew puzzle that's been in lots of games. I did see one person complain this version of the puzzle is way too easy. All you have to do is click on the haunted tour sign and Oscar goes away. That's not so much of a distraction as it is just waiting for Oscar to go home at the end of the day. And seriously, what museum leaves everything opened and unlocked at nighttime? As Nancy proves, anyone can walk in, steal stuff, and leave without problems. I don't know why the culprit made such a complicated plan to steal the crown jewels when you can steal whatever you want during the haunted tour. Nancy says she's just borrowing the jewels. She's not stealing them. She doesn't give the jewels back after using them to open Merrick's trunk, though. The trunk soon disappears from the game, and it's never mentioned again. Hopefully Merrick found the jewels and returned them to the museum on his own. You can't open the artifact for the first time during the haunted tour. If you try to do that, the artifact isn't there. It's weird that Oscar protects the artifact before it's opened, but not afterwards. The artifact has jewels in it. Great! Now I don't have to protect it anymore. The haunted tour is kind of fun. The museum is filled with smoke and they've opened up the roped off area. I don't know why this area is only open during the haunted tour. The tour is self-guided. You have to click on the speaker symbol next to the numbered exhibits. It is a little slow, but I love the corny sound effects and voiceover. Whoever narrated this part did a great job. The last 2 exhibits are about the Dalibor Knight. While the first 3 are about unimportant things, I would have put the Dalibor Knight stuff first, since it's the part that matters. The villain's already dressed up like the knight and tried to attack Nancy. Why did the villain use a knight costume? I don't see how that's connected to the villain's plot. Maybe the idea is that it could be the ghost of the knight who died here, but Nancy doesn't entertain the possibility that it's a real ghost. She's sure it's just a person in a costume. Maybe the reason for the knight villain is something boring, Like, they already designed the knight for a puzzle, and it's way cheaper to reuse the knight design than it is to make the Puppet of Death monster. Nancy takes the stolen jewels to Merrick's store. You put the 3 jewels into the correct holes to reveal a slider puzzle. You can move gems into the center circle where you can rotate them. The goal is to get the gems into the correct spots, which requires a little bit of thinking ahead. I like this puzzle. All the parts of the trunk opening puzzle are decent. Solving the puzzle gives you a small yellow key. It must be used on the bottom of Patricia's snow globe. As I said, there are no hints indicating you should do this. I imagine some people got stuck on this puzzle. The image in the snow globe changes. Players are supposed to recognize the new scene as one of the murals in the tunnels. I doubt anyone did. When Nancy was in the tunnels, she was chased by a villain. She didn't exactly have time to stop and admire the scenery. There is a second clue. You can rotate the snow globe to see the floods below hide secrets lost. The police mentioned floods in the tunnels, so that's your clue to go back to the tunnels. For whatever reason, you can't go back to the tunnels through the entrance in Leo's office. You have to use the outside entrance, which is a large grate with no visible handle. I'm not sure how Nancy opens the door and goes through it, to be honest. Nancy finds the matching picture on the tunnel wall. There's a keyhole underneath. Use the snow globe on the keyhole for a puzzle. Nancy says, "How has nobody ever found this? It's just begging to be solved." That line annoys me. Of course nobody found the secret puzzle. The key was locked in a trunk for hundreds of years. You know this, Nancy. And now that Nancy knows for sure what Patricia's snow globe is used for, I think she should be able to talk to Patricia about the snow globe. Seriously, how did Patricia just happen to give Nancy the ancient key to the alchemist's lab? There's a lights puzzle that I enjoy. You have to put the 14 things on the pegs on the board. Right-click to rotate them. Your goal is to have every space lit up. 2 pieces have 3 holes while 1 has 4, so the key is getting those pieces into the correct spots. For added difficulty, there are 3 pegs which don't get used. There are no hints or instructions for the puzzle. I think it's easy enough to deduce the goal is to light up the entire board. That said, I could understand if someone got stuck because they had no idea what to do. I'm sure someone thought the goal was to light up the bottom right corner spot, like a similar lights puzzle in Tomb of the Lost Queen. When you light up the board, the wall swings in, revealing a hidden door. Nancy goes through it to reach the alchemist's lab. I like the look of the lab area. I wish we could examine the stuff on the shelves. Instead, we're limited to the tables, which again has a lot of stuff we can't examine. We can only see a chunk of rock and a book. This is one of the puzzles that broke me when I first played the game. You can watch the video where I go back and forth between the puzzle and the hints, and I still had no idea what to do. In my defense, the hints are badly worded. The book has a transparent page on the left and a real page on the right. They both have a circle design in the middle. The hint says, align the transparent page with the real page, which I did. I moved the transparent page to the right, so the circle designs overlapped perfectly. The transparent page snaps into place, and it can't be moved again. That's as far as I got, which is why I think that should be the puzzle solution. But no! The actual solution is to place the page, then right-click to rotate it until the 2 small X's overlap. I have many problems with this. The second red X is hard to see. I didn't notice it was there. I bet it's even harder to see if you're not playing with maximum graphics settings. The hint is dumb. If the solution is to align, then rotate the page, the hint should say, align, then rotate, not just align. For that matter, why is the solution align, then rotate? Why can't you rotate the transparent page first? You can do that, but the game won't accept that solution. It forces you to fully rotate the page again. It's a shame you can't rotate the page first, because the tiny X is a little easier to see without a transparent page covering it. I noticed the control pop-ups are incomplete here, and they don't have the left-click control icon for this, or the potion moving portion. I mean, I probably wouldn't have noticed the control pop-ups had they all been there, but there's a chance I might have gone, there are 3 control pop-ups instead of the usual 2. This means something. When you solve the puzzle, the game zooms in on the book so you can see it clearly. That is dumb too. The game should have zoomed in before the puzzle, not after. Then the red X's would be clearly visible, and it'd be obvious they're part of the puzzle. I'd like the puzzle more if it stopped here. Instead, it has the same problem as the Vladena safe puzzle. There are at least 5 distinct steps that must be taken in a specific order, and there's nothing to indicate what the correct order is. You have to guess what to do when. The next step is symbol matching. The red lines touch 4 symbols. You want to flip the page and match those 4 symbols to a completely different set of symbols. Ugh. You want to do the same thing with the 3 symbols on the inside cover. Match them with the triangle symbols on page 3. I wonder if the puzzle would be easier if it didn't do the symbol matching stuff. It would certainly be easier if players were given the correct 7 symbols instead of being forced to swap out the symbols into 2 different groups. That certainly feels like an extra unnecessary step that was added just to increase the puzzle's difficulty. This would have been a good place to have an amateur sleuth variation with less symbol swapping. Now you have 7 symbols. The next step is to sort them correctly. This part also doesn't make sense. One of the 4 red symbols has an X, the others have no marks. The solution is to start at the X and go clockwise. That's the correct order of those symbols. They definitely needed an extra clue here, because it's not obvious what to do just by looking at the page. I didn't know X was supposed to be the starting point. My instinct is the opposite. I figure X is the end of the lines, because X marks the spot. As a result, I got the 4 red symbols backwards. Haha, just kidding. I didn't get this far into the puzzle. I gave up long before that part. There is a red X on the leftmost question mark on the inside cover page. I'm guessing that is supposed to be your clue that you start sorting on the X. Either that or the question mark red X has something to do with the step of rotating the transparent page so the X is a line. It's unclear what the question mark red X means. It's not a helpful clue. At least sorting the triangle symbols makes sense. They're listed in the same left to right order on both pages. The next step is to sort the symbols again according to the paper on the inside cover. So, sorting them multiple times, this makes my brain hurt. The paper has the triangle symbols in the top row with the 4 red symbols in the bottom row. You'd think the symbols go from left to right, top to bottom, correct? Just like normal reading? No! It's actually bottom to top, then left to right. So bottom of column 1, top of column 1, bottom of column 2, top of column 2, bottom of column 3, top of column 3. That's the correct way to read it. I'm so glad I gave up on the puzzle several steps ago, because I never would have figured it out. So now you have the 7 correct symbols in the correct order. It's finally time to start the puzzle. Go to the other table in the room. The strategy guide says when you click on the table for the first time, Nancy will automatically put the black stone into the dome. That did not happen for me. I had to move the stone from my inventory into the dome to start the puzzle. That's not a big problem, but it would have been nice if the trigger for the puzzle worked as advertised. The various ingredients and bowls have symbols on them. There's also a bowl in the middle. It's not listed in the instructions, but players have to use it anyway. That is, the first 3 symbols indicate 2 ingredients, then the mortar. I think we should be able to move the ingredients into the mortar and then mix them. Instead, the game makes you put the 2 ingredients in the middle bowl, then move it to the mortar for mixing, then move it back to the middle bowl. That's 2 extra steps you have to take with the middle bowl. I think the middle bowl could have been left out completely. I would have left the middle bowl out of the puzzle entirely. Or I would have added those 2 extra steps to the instructions. On the other hand, getting the 7-step instructions was hard enough. Having to deal with 2 more would have been nightmarish. Next, you add an ingredient to the middle bowl, then move the middle bowl to the burner. This time, the game automatically returns the potion back to the middle bowl. Why do you have to move it back to the middle after the 1 triangle symbol, but not the other? That inconsistency annoys me. Move the last ingredient to the center bowl, then move it to the glass dome, which is the last triangle symbol. Poof! The stone magically turns into a locker combination. It's easy enough to see that this goes on the lock cabinet near the corner. You need to rotate the rings so they show the same 3 symbols as the combination. The puzzle's simple enough, but the controls are a little touchy. You're supposed to hold and drag to move the rings. In previous games, they had left and right arrows to rotate rings. That worked much better. The bottom left part of the cabinet has jewels, which look just like the ones Nancy stole from the museum. Underneath one of them is a coin that you must pick up. It's easy to miss this small item, especially since there are identical coins in the cabinet that Nancy doesn't pick up. The cabinet has a lot of drawers that Nancy ignores. You have to open the upper middle drawer for a book. Nancy notes that it's too old, she can't read it. Maybe that's the problem with the alchemy puzzles. They purposely avoided using any written instructions for the puzzles, because the alchemist wouldn't have written in English. It's definitely hard to explain a puzzle when you can only use symbols. Then again, the snow globe had English words on it. Nancy's journal instantly translates Czech words, and the next round of the alchemy challenge has writing in English, although that writing probably comes from Vladena and not the alchemist. I definitely would have included some writing here to make the puzzles easier to understand, even though that sacrifices some of the realism. Once you have the book and the coin, you can leave the alchemy lab. The exit to the tunnels that Nancy just used is closed off for some reason. Who locked it? Did they ever explain why Nancy has to leave the tunnels through a different exit this time? That exit was not opened last time. Who unlocked the new exit? Just like before, you wander the tunnels at random until you find a door, which makes your cursor change to an exit icon. This takes you to a new tunnel area where the Ghost Knight appears. Why does he appear at this particular point? Last time he appeared the instant Nancy set foot in the tunnels. This time he waits a while before appearing. Maybe he's feeling a little more polite today. This new tunnel area looks a bit like a torture chamber, as there's a skeleton chained to a rock and a skeleton in a cage. I'm fine with not knowing the story behind them. You want to go all the way to the end of the tunnel, turn left, then go forward to a ladder. Click on the ladder to leave the tunnels. After a loading screen, Nancy appears near Radek's Marionette cart. The game's cover has an open manhole cover with smoke coming out of it. I assume Nancy just crawled through the manhole to get out of the tunnels to the courtyard. I also assume Radek used this exit after the first tunnel chase. Otherwise, it should have been impossible for him to get back to his normal clothing and area so quickly. It's nighttime now. Adela calls. Nancy's panting at the start of the call, which makes sense because she's been running from the villain, but I noticed she didn't pant at all in the 4 seconds it took for her to answer the phone. Nancy asks why Adela is calling at this particular moment. Adela did text Nancy right after the first tunnel chase, and earlier she called right after Ned hung up. Adela is just really good at timing her phone calls, okay? Nancy says she just got the Alchemist journal. Adela offers to translate it, since Adela knows Old Czech and German, and Nancy is not high-tech enough to use Google Translate. Nancy promises to meet with Adela tomorrow morning. Adela sends you a text message as soon as you hang up. That's silly. I would have put in a 10-second pause between the text and the end of the phone call. Give Adela some time to write the text message, you know? This text confuses me because it doesn't match the conversation they just had. Adela apologizes. She can't meet with you later tonight, like planned. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was to meet with her tomorrow. Also, why can't Adela meet Nancy at the cafe until extremely late? What is Adela doing that's more important? Does she have a hot date with Radek or something? Due to Adela's change in plans, you'll have to leave the journal for her at the cafe, where she'll pick it up later. That would be fine, except Patricia is not at the cafe. I don't feel safe leaving an important book out in the open where anyone could take it, inside a building where people are encouraged to take whatever book they see. What stops the culprit from stealing the journal now? That would have been the best possible move for the culprit to take. Nancy would not have been able to stop the culprit if that had happened. Adela gives you Patricia's phone number. Patricia Novikova is added as a phone contact. I have no idea where that name comes from. Everywhere else in the game, she's called Patricia Vitkovsky. Messing up a character's name is pretty bad. The new task is also bad. All the other tasks are straightforward things like investigate Oscar and solve the second riddle. This one is Leave the journal at the cafe. Make sure to let Patricia know you left it. Then check to see if Radek is around to make sure to ask him about the Residente. It's a bunch of different stuff thrown together, which looks super lazy to me. It's so long, it doesn't fit on the phone's task list. To make the whole task fit in the text box, they had to shrink the text so much you can barely read it. Also, I think it might be bad grammar to say check to see if Radek is around to make sure to ask him about the Residente. That definitely could have been worded more clearly, and it could have been done with fewer words. I want to know the story behind this task, which clearly doesn't fit in with the others. Is it a placeholder task that they forgot to change? Maybe a last-minute addition? This is one of the places where players often complain they're stuck and they don't know how to continue. I could imagine someone getting so frustrated with those complaints that they threw everything onto the task list just to stop the complaining. Well, not everything, because there are hidden requirements you have to meet in order to continue with the game. That's why people get stuck here. It is not obvious what you have to do. Hidden requirement number 1 is to have a text conversation with Ned. I must have goofed up somehow, because I needed to have 2 conversations with Ned. The first one was hard to notice, because it was not marked with the green bubble that indicates there's a new text message from Ned. It turns out the game doesn't let you have 2 text conversations in a row. You have to close your phone in between text conversations. That's an arbitrary limit. The first conversation with Ned is about the Residente. It finishes with Nancy and Ned sending text emoticons at each other. I wonder why they haven't upgraded to using emoji yet. I think this is why the Ned texts were acting weird. I closed my phone too early, so Ned did not send the final smiley face, meaning the conversation was considered unfinished, so the game couldn't move on to the next Ned conversation. The second conversation with Ned is about Adela. Nancy's a little suspicious of Adela because Adela's phone call was oddly timed, and Adela suggested Nancy find the keys that unlock the crown jewels. What? Adela said nothing like that! Their conversation was about translating the journal. Where is Nancy getting the crown jewel keys from? Hidden requirement number 2 is call the police for an update on Leo. It's just like the Visit Leo's Office challenge after the puppet show. It takes place at a very specific point in the game, but you're not told when. You just have to magically know the police call takes place now. It sounds like the police called the airline. The airline said Leo was on his flight, so the police closed the case. Nancy asks if someone actually saw Leo on the flight, because someone could have hacked the airline and changed the manifest. That sounds like a lot of work, but maybe it did happen. If Leo missed the flight, the airline probably would have had a record of it. So how did the culprit make the airline think Leo was there? Did Elka take the flight in disguise as Leo, then immediately take a different flight back home as her normal self? Nancy goes to the cafe to leave the journal. Why is the cafe even open when there are no employees around to take care of things? Adela said to leave it behind the counter. I would leave it in one of the below-the-counter shelf spaces, where it's not in anybody's way. But Nancy puts it right against the register. This is a silly complaint, but I don't like how Nancy puts the journal down. The journal is in your inventory, so I thought you're supposed to move the journal from your inventory to the counter. Instead, you're supposed to click on the part of the counter where the cursor turns into a magnifying glass. Why does magnifying glass cursor mean put item down? Nancy needs to text Patricia about the journal. I'm surprised she doesn't text Adela too. If you didn't talk to Patricia about Residente in person, she and Nancy have the Residente conversation via text. I think the conversation is word for word the same either way. The last part of Nancy's long task is talk to Radek about Residente. And towards the start of the day, Nancy got the task, learn more about the Residente. These 2 tasks are totally separate. They refer to different conversations. I think they should have renamed these tasks. It's confusing that talk to everyone about Residente is different from talk to Radek about Residente. Like, Radek counts as part of everyone. The idea is that you have to talk to everybody about Residente, including Radek. This triggers a new, different conversation with Radek. Nancy asks if Residente is real. Radek says yes, and he admires how they've protected Prague from unjust rulers over the centuries. You should progress to the next day of the game after the second Residente conversation with Radek. As I said, it's an easy place to get stuck and not know how to progress. That happened to me. The next day, Nancy asks Patricia to distract Adela for her. Patricia agrees, since she was asked to distract Nancy at the start of the game. Was she, though? I feel like Adela said, pretend to be me for a while, not keep Nancy distracted. Adela comes in and sets her bag down. Patricia asks her to help with the coffee. The latte art challenge is so tough, I'm sure that will keep her distracted for 10 minutes. Nancy has a challenge to snoop through Adela's bag. It has things like receipts and business cards, not to mention a Cocoa Kringle bar. The important item is the jewelry box. You're supposed to turn it upside down and click on the lid. When you do this, the game zooms in on the box. I would have had the box be normal sized the whole time, but maybe that's just me. You have a puzzle to move letter tiles left and right to spell out words. I think the challenge is okay. If you don't do it in time, there's a game over sequence. The words you want to spell are jewel, spire, and clock. I first thought these words would be important clues for a puzzle later on, but no, they're just randomly chosen words. When you solve the puzzle, you finally get to see Adela's necklace. I think it looks kind of weird myself. It looks good as a secret endgame puzzle, not so good as a necklace people would actually wear. There's also a half-finished insurance form which proves Adela's necklace was not insured. That means Adela is probably not a culprit running an insurance scam. Adela returns and complains about Patricia wasting her time. Nancy brags, I know why Patricia asked you. I don't know why Nancy says this. It's like she's trying to bring attention to the fact that she had Adela distracted on purpose. Nancy asks about the insurance. Adela confesses she didn't really want to sell the necklace. She put that up for sale as a fake. Gee, Adela, that sounds like important information that should have been brought to my attention 5 days ago! Adela's real goal was to find the necklace's true owner. It belongs to a noble family that went to hiding after the war. Adela isn't a noble, although some people think so because she's rich and successful. Adela feels a little ashamed that she's done nothing to discourage those rumors. Adela says the alchemist journal was fascinating, but she follows this up by saying she didn't have the time or the interest to translate the whole thing. So it's fascinating, but not that fascinating. She only translated 3 riddle poems. Each riddle is a puzzle, and you can solve them in any order. I like this challenge. It feels like a classic Nancy Drew setup. I just wish the puzzles were better. The clock puzzle and night puzzle are both bad. The candle puzzle's okay. Honestly, I think solving the riddles is more fun than solving the actual puzzles. You can solve them on your own, or ask Patricia for help. And just like that, Patricia is more useful than the in-game hint system. Thanks, Patricia. The strategy guide says that Patricia points you towards the flyers on the rack which have information on the famous legends of Prague. She didn't do that when I played the game. The flyers don't have anything about legends either. Discuss the investigation with Zane is added to the task list once Nancy gets the journal from Adela. This is an example of the task list being used well, because without this task, I would not have thought to call Zane at this particular point. He's the Degas expert, right? Why should he have something to say about the journal? Zane says he's flying to Rome to make sure Leo arrived there. Nancy is surprised to hear Leo checked into his flight. Even though she already knows this, the police told her, and she saw the digital boarding pass on the secretary's computer. Heck, the computer had the date and flight number, while Leo's calendar had the ticket number. With all that information, Nancy could have checked Leo into the flight herself. Airlines can do online check-ins. I know, because my parents started arguments with me about this more than once. You can't use a computer to check into an airport. You have to call 36 hours in advance, or they won't let you on the plane. Don't tell Mom and Dad I said that, okay? They'll just get mad at me if they see this video. Nancy again mentions the possibility that somebody altered the plane's manifest. Sounds like Nancy needs to visit the airport and teach them how to do cyberblock. The first riddle is about being born in fire but left cold. It's wrought by iron and doesn't bleed. That refers to armor, which is made in a forge. It's the suit of armor inside the museum. Oscar doesn't let you touch exhibits during the day, so you have to take another haunted tour. I understand the general idea, which is get the armor into the correct pose to solve the puzzle. The problem is, I have no idea what the correct pose is. There's nothing about the pose in the riddle. The only hint for the puzzle is check the museum, which does not help. When I first played the game, it took me an hour to solve the puzzle. At least it felt like an hour. Unless you get the correct solution by dumb luck, you have to try every single possible pose. It was terrible and frustrating. Definitely not a puzzle where it's obvious what you're supposed to do. There are too many puzzles like that in this game. Every few seconds, a shaft of moonlight goes all the way from the left to the right. I assume that's the key to the puzzle, but I still don't know what it is. The strategy guide says, make the light ray move uninterrupted from the left to the right. But as far as I can tell, that is only half true. In the correct solution, the arm with the shield has the moonlight go straight from top to bottom. Yeah, that arm's good. The arm with the sword doesn't. The moonlight takes a big curve around the neck, and the sword is most certainly not lined up with the arm. You can look at the armor from the right side or the left. I just checked. If you're looking at the armor from the left, the game doesn't accept the correct solution. It only accepts the correct solution if you look at it from the right. That is a really bad error. Why do you even give players the option of looking from the left if it's always considered wrong? The solution is to move the head and hands twice. You move the shoulders once. When you do that, Nancy says something. You can move the head again to get half of a key blueprint. The other half is still in the journal. That's a nice touch I enjoy. Most games would have a full page picture for each blueprint. This one was ripped in half. It's an extra detail. The next riddle is Brothers of the Sun, made for darkness. Fire makes them cry, but tears make their heads fall off. It's candles! Like the suit of armor, the riddle says where the puzzle is, but not what you have to do to solve the puzzle. The only candles are near the outside of Leo's office. There's a symbol for copper on the left, which you identify with the alchemy chart. Use the copper coin on it to start the puzzle. You want to spell out the Latin word for copper, which is cuprum, according to Leo's calendar. So yeah, you have to throw like 3 random clues scattered all throughout the game together to figure this out. If you click on a candle, it lights up all 4 squares touching it. If the square is already lit, the square is darkened. This puzzle's okay. I think I cheated on it because the suit of armor puzzle broke my brain. I should have tried this one first. There are multiple solutions. I'm proud of myself for finding a solution that is faster than the one that the hint menu offers. Senior mode has a few extra letters more than junior mode, making it harder. As I said, this puzzle is okay. That faint praise makes it my favorite of the 3 puzzles here. The third alchemist puzzle says, who cares? Doesn't matter. Nancy can't solve it on her own. She has to ask Patricia for help. Patricia says it refers to time, which must refer to the famous astronomical clock. Only Nancy can't mess with the real clock. That would cause problems. Instead, she gets to mess with a perfect model of the clock here in the cafe. Legend says peril will befall Prague if their famous clock stops, so they built Patricia's clock as an emergency backup. You've got to love a curse that takes a coffee shop model into consideration. Patricia should really advertise this. Nancy has to ask Ned for help. I don't know why this is the one puzzle that Ned can assist with. He's prepared an entire lecture on the topic, complete with slides. Ned, you're such a nerd. I can't be the only person who wanted to solve the puzzle, saw that it came with 5 pages of notes, then instantly gave up. I don't have time for that. I feel like Ned's notes could have been simplified. He says he already simplified it by ignoring Babylonian time and Sidereal time. Yes, but you could simplify it further by ignoring Bohemian time. Just focus on the time system that starts at midnight because that's the one players are familiar with. Reading Ned's example here, I don't get it. Like, he shows 2:30 p.m. during the zodiac symbol for Gemini. Gemini is 31 days long. How do you know it's May 22nd specifically? Maybe that was in the part he simplified. The bottom of the clock says it was commissioned by King Rudolph II upon his coronation, which is your clue to set the clock to the date and time he was crowned. I don't think it's obvious this is a particular date you should aim for. I would have added another clue inside the riddle itself. The museum says you want November 1st, 1575 at 6 a.m. That's easy enough. Kind of? 6 o'clock in November means you point the one hand at the 6 on the inside dial while going through the Scorpio symbol because it's November. Meanwhile, the golden hand points at the 12 because, there are 16 hours of daylight left? I don't know. I don't understand that part of the solution. Ned's explanation involves daylight savings time, which did not exist back then and continues to not exist in my heart. I know there are multiple hands and dials on the clock in real life, but it's a little too tough to move the hands and dials to the correct position. When you try moving the gold hand, both it and the inside dial swing around so quickly, you can't have any precision. Maybe they should have let the players move the zodiac ring by itself to make it easier. I think the clock puzzle would be fine if it was just set the clock to the right time. It's easy enough to look at a screenshot of the correct solution and copy that. The second half of the puzzle is the one that gets all my hate. If you watched my first playthrough of the game, you'll see I solved the second half of the puzzle first. Both halves of the puzzle open a door at the top of the clock. I looked at the newly opened door, and the game froze. I had to quit and load the autosave. It's very frustrating to have the game crash because you solve the puzzle from bottom to top, not top to bottom. The first part of the calendar puzzle is fine. There are 4 statues, 2 of them control the month, 2 of them control the date. The information you need is found in Patricia's recipe book, of all places. I imagine very few people saw this puzzle and went, "Oh, I should double check the coffee recipes for this." It says November is a picture of a man cutting down an oak tree. The next part of the calendar puzzle is awful, and I hate it. Even more because I had to do it twice. A yellow cylinder appears. I have no idea what it is. It looks like a weird thing that doesn't exist in real life, but it exists in this game, so you can have a puzzle. Your goal is to rotate the cylinders so the lines match up in an incredibly specific way. They have to match up on the front and the back, but you can't ever see the back. So at any moment, you can have a piece which looks good, but it's wrong because it doesn't fit on the backside place that you can't see. This is terrible puzzle design, if you ask me. If there was a flip button, which let you flip the device around to see the backside, then the puzzle would be okay. It'd be sort of like the triangles puzzle in Curse of Blackmore Manor, where you go back and forth between the 2 halves to get it right. That could have worked. Another big problem with the puzzle is that there's no obvious starting point. If you showed the puzzle to 20 people and asked them all, where is the starting point on the left-hand side, I don't think anyone would get it correct. It took me a while to realize that the raised part on the far left and on the far right are both irrelevant to the solution. It looks like they should be important. On Amateur Sleuth mode, the starting point is 80% of the way from the bottom. On Master Sleuth mode, it's 85% of the way from the bottom. Someone please explain to me how the heck players are supposed to figure this out on their own. Because it looks to me like the line starts in a totally random spot that's not connected to anything. On both modes, the line ends somewhere on the backside that we can't see, so there's no use trying to figure out where it is. This puzzle would be instantly improved if there was an obvious starting point. If the leftmost ring was already in place and it couldn't be moved, that would be great. On Amateur Sleuth mode, there are various grooves between the rings. The line has to go through the grooves. 2 are at the very bottom and 1 is at the very top. The lines there connect the lines on that backside, which you can't see, so it's not helpful. I have no idea how this puzzle got through testing without every single tester complaining the puzzle is impossible to figure out. Please leave a comment if you understand how players are supposed to solve the puzzle on their own. I'm sorry for shouting. Please be helpful. You guys are the best. Thank you, subscribers. Thanks to anybody who's been watching to this point in the video. Like, that's some real dedication there, watching like a 3-hour video. You have to solve the puzzle on your own because there is no hint for it. The other parts of the clock puzzle are explained in the hints section, but not the cylinder puzzle. Oh, gosh. When you solve the clock puzzles, you get 3 blueprints. And when you solve all 3 puzzle riddles from the journal, Nancy comments she's gotten all the blueprints. That is not true. She got 6 blueprints, not 7. The missing blueprint is the key. It's for the key that Nancy got from the anonymous text message puzzle at the start of the game. Again, who sent Nancy that text, and how did they have one of the keys? When you get the blueprints, there is a brief scene of smoke coming through a doorway. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to mean the smoky ghost knight is standing in the doorway, watching you. The scene plays even if you did the clock puzzle last, meaning Nancy's in the cafe, so it's way too far for her to see that doorway. Nancy texts Ned to say she is sick of the ghost knight following her around all the time. All of the time is a major exaggeration, Nancy. He showed up twice. Nancy specifically mentions that the second time she entered the tunnels, she entered by a different direction, but the knight still found her. True, but it took the knight a lot longer to find her the second time. Nancy had enough time to do all the alchemy stuff and stroll through the maze before the knight appeared. So, no, I don't think she can reasonably conclude the knight knows where she is at all times. Nancy correctly guesses the knight is tracking her phone. Clever players should be able to solve the mystery here. The culprit is tracking Nancy's phone. Elka is the only person who touched Nancy's phone. Therefore, Elka is the culprit who placed the phone tracker. Now, if I was in Nancy's situation, I'd just leave my phone in my hotel room all day, or something like that. That way I could investigate in peace. Nancy decides to set a trap for the culprit by leaving her phone in a secluded location. No way will the culprit be suspicious to see Nancy's been in the same place for 6 hours straight. The secluded location is the corner of the courtyard opposite from Vladena's. There are enough people around that I don't think this area counts as secluded. The ghost knight would have to walk past several people to reach this spot. Remember, both tunnel chases ended when Nancy entered the square. It's clear that the knight is unwilling to travel in the public square. I definitely would have set the trap somewhere else. I wonder what Nancy would have done if the game hadn't detoured into this set a trap story. She just got all the blueprints. What was Nancy planning on doing with them? When you're close to the gate, Nancy says, "This place is good enough." The gate is locked. You want to open it with the nearby screwdriver. When you pick up the screwdriver, Nancy says, "I gotta have some torque," which is a reference to the Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake game. Use the screwdriver on the gate for an unlocking puzzle. There's a meter at the top of the screen. You want to click when the moving piece is in the green part of the meter. That releases one of the pins. You have to do this 4 times in a row. If you mess up, the screen shakes, there's a clanging noise, and one of the finished pins is locked again. I think this is a decent challenge. It's easy enough to figure out what you have to do. I like it more than the similar puzzle of unlocking Judge Danforth's door in Midnight in Salem. But I do prefer how Midnight in Salem had the puzzle instructions on screen during that puzzle. I guess that's one way Midnight in Salem is superior to this game. Pretty much every puzzle in this game could use on-screen instructions. The game switches to nighttime when you go through the gate. You need to pick up a hammer and some boxes, then climb to the top of the scaffolding. There are ghost boxes here, which honestly look kinda silly, but I'm glad they're included, because I would probably get stuck on this puzzle if they weren't there. You want to use the boxes in your inventory on the ghost boxes. Somehow Nancy puts down twice as many boxes as she picked up. Maybe we're supposed to pretend she went back and reloaded when we weren't looking. You want to go to the far side of the scaffolding and use the hammer on the latches. That makes the grates ready to fall at a moment's notice. I'm kind of surprised they don't fall right away. The whole point of the trap is that the boxes are heavy enough to trap someone. Yet they're light enough to not fall right away. If you step in the wrong spot, Nancy falls to her death. Instead of sending you back to the moment when you fell, the second chance sends you back a few minutes to when you first entered the gate. I don't know why. This is another 15-minute segment where you can't save or switch control schemes. Maybe there was something weird with this one-time area that messes up saves. A ghost phone appears on a box. Click on it to place your phone down. Nancy waits an unspecified amount of time for the ghost knight to appear. The knight looks great here, way better than the tunnel chase scenes. I feel cheated we didn't get a proper look at it earlier. The knight wanders around, and Nancy drops the boxes on him. I thought he would be crushed by the boxes, but no, it looks like they fell perfectly to form a nice circle around him. I love how he runs around in a panic looking for an exit. Dude, half of these boxes look like empty cardboard. You should be able to push them aside easily. The knight gives up and removes his helmet, revealing he's Radek. I am way too amused by how the visor covers up half his face for this entire 7-minute scene. Was that just an excuse to avoid animating his mouth? Radek says, "I never wanted to scare you," which is a total lie. He was clearly trying to scare her this whole time. Maybe even worse, it definitely seemed like he killed Nancy in the game over scenes in the tunnels. Sadly, this culprit confrontation doesn't mention the tunnels, or how Radek makes smoke appear, or where he got the costume, or what puppet number 12 is, or why he had a puppet that unlocks Oscar's artifact, or why he thinks the banana sweater is flattering on him, or any of the things that I would like to know. Instead, we get a round of Radek saying, "I can't explain right now. We should leave." He doesn't know how the phone tracking app works. Then Merrick comes, and he gets a round of, "I can't explain right now. We should leave." I really hate it when "there's no time to explain" is used as an excuse to avoid giving explanations. I don't know why the guys are in such a rush, unless they're worried about being seen by a random passerby, which shouldn't be the case, because this is supposed to be a secluded location. I'm not sure why Merrick came to visit. He didn't do that the other times Radek did his ghost night routine. My guess is that Merrick and Radek made a plan, like, "Hey, I'm off to scare Nancy. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, come after me." Then again, Merrick tells Radek, "You look ridiculous," in check, which makes it seem like he has not seen the night costume before. Nancy asks if Radek and Merrick are Residente. She's right, but I have no idea why she brought it up now. Radek says they didn't give him much choice. They sent tracking software. They forced him to do the night routine to inspire Nancy to find the 7 keys faster. I would love more details about this. What were the specific orders that Radek received? Radek says he won't dress up like the knight anymore. Nancy says, "You certainly won't," which is a weird line delivery. It's like she's saying, "You won't, but I will." Merrick and Radek have just realized that they are after the crown jewels. Radek thinks Nancy can help stop them. It makes me mad that Merrick and Radek play the pronoun game for 2 minutes instead of answering Nancy's questions. Nancy finally asks, "Who are they?" It's Lukaji, the internet company. They're secretly a blackmail organization run by the culprit. The culprit must have blackmailed Radek into doing the night stuff. Merrick says Elka doesn't know about his double life as a member of Residente. He purposely keeps it a secret because Elka's mother died during a Residente job. Nancy says she can help Radek and Merrick lay a trap for Lukaji, but she needs proof they can be trusted. Merrick gives Nancy a pin for Residente members only. That's nice, but it doesn't prove you can be trusted. The pin has Arena written on it. Nancy sees the pin and says, "Arena Strojnik." How does Nancy know Arena's last name here? Was she just guessing because that's Elka's last name and it's reasonable to assume Elka and her mom have the same last name? Whatever, Nancy's satisfied with the pin. The 3 of them leave her apparat where they can talk in private and get Radek out of the night costume. Somehow, Radek manages to change clothes and get to apparat before Nancy. She puts her phone on the counter and says Lukaji won't be able to track her now that she's removed the SIM card. I don't think that's how SIM cards work. If that's all she had to do to avoid being tracked, why didn't she do that earlier? Taking the SIM card out would have been much easier than setting up the night trap. Merrick asks what Nancy wants him to do. She says, "Make the keys, like how Lukaji expects." Am I missing something here? Because Lukaji expects Merrick to make the keys is new information to me. It implies that Merrick and Radek were ordered to steal the blueprints from Nancy. How were they planning to do that? How does Nancy know about this? Why wasn't this part of the long conversation they just had? Merrick says, "I'll show you how it's done." Only he doesn't. Nancy is thrown into a puzzle where she has to sort the keys according to instructions, such as emerald is heaviest and rubelite is heavier than spinel. Where did these instructions come from? I like the puzzle, but it sounds like the internet hates this puzzle because there is no weight listed for the bottom middle blueprint. You have to guess what that weight is. You've got a 1 in 6 chance of getting it right, which is pretty unfair. I got it right on my first guess. It's the heaviest one. I don't know why the puzzle refers to the keys as emerald, sapphire, and pearl. The finished keys are clearly not made of those materials. My guess is that the puzzle refers to the jewels on the tops of the keys, but if so, why does the puzzle exist? The keys should work the same no matter what decorative gems are on them. The graphics for the puzzle could use improvement. It is too hard to read the weights written on the pages. Nancy puts the 6 labels on the correct blueprints. The screen goes black as Merrick makes the keys. It takes him about 7 seconds, which is very fast indeed. I have no idea where he makes the keys. There's clearly no forge hidden in his store. Merrick asks, what next? Nancy says they'll do a dead drop with the keys, as instructed. As instructed? Between this and make the keys like how Lukaji expects, it's pretty clear to me that Nancy and Merrick must have had an off-screen conversation about his orders from Lukaji. Nancy says she'll watch the dead drop to see who picks it up, which is not a bad idea. Radek thinks it's too dangerous. Merrick suggests putting a tracker in a key. The culprit shouldn't notice it, because the tracker is pretty old-fashioned from Merrick's early days in Residente. Merrick says he'll put a tracker in this key. We never learn which specific key. Elka is in the store, by the way. It's kind of funny she stands around doing nothing with all the spy stuff going on in the next room. You have to place the bag by the statue in the courtyard. Again, I don't understand why magnifying glass cursor means put item down. You return to Merrick and he gives you the pager that is connected to his transmitter. He probably should have given this to Nancy before the dead drop. I got stuck on this puzzle because, like other puzzles in the game, it is not explained what you have to do. I couldn't figure out the first step, which is return to the dead drop. I didn't think of that because the dead drop's over. I know the keys are not there. Why should I go there? Merrick did explain the next step, which is easy enough to figure out even if you weren't paying attention. Nancy plays hot and cold with the pager. The closer she is to the correct spot, the faster the pager beeps. When Nancy finds the right spot, she says something, and she has to find the next spot. There are a couple of places which are hard to find. On my first playthrough, I gave up trying to find the correct tile. I just had Nancy walk over every single tile in the courtyard. She got the right one eventually. It'd be way more helpful if Merrick gave you the current location of the 7 keys, instead of giving you 14 places that the keys visited recently. But like the culprit chase at the end of Phantom of Venice, a continual transmission would make the puzzle too easy. Nancy follows the keys through some cool-looking underground tunnels. Too bad we don't get much opportunity to explore them. The puzzle ends at the Alchemy lab. Use the snow globe to get inside again. This time we see the culprit is Vladena. And now I'm wondering what she's doing here. She's looking at the table and saying perfectni, but the table isn't any different from before. It's not like she's making a potion or anything here. Vladena insists on thanking Nancy for finding the 7 keys. Now that she mentions it, I don't see the bag with the 7 keys anywhere. Vladena says Nancy is good with puzzles, but not much else, which is mean, if accurate. Vladena claims that she's the mastermind behind Lukaji. She's been manipulating Nancy from the very start. She stole Adela's gems as an excuse to have Nancy brought to Prague so Nancy would find the 7 keys. Presumably, Vladena tried to solve the alchemist riddle puzzles on her own, but she couldn't do it. I bet you got stuck on the suit of armor puzzle. Nancy says, "You want to steal the crown jewels? For money?" That's a weird line with a weird delivery. I love Vladena's response that, yeah, duh, the jewels are literally priceless. Vladena says her family has stolen gems for years, and she's planning to steal another set of crown jewels once this crime is done. After the end credits, there is a brief scene with Zane. He messages Nancy. He says Vladena escaped before the police arrived. He's worried there's more to her plans. These two scenes strongly suggest Vladena will be back in a future game. Nancy says Vladena will never be allowed to handle the crown jewels since she's not a noble. This is a somewhat odd point to bring up. I know Adela talked about being a noble earlier, but Vladena didn't say anything about it, did she? Did I miss that conversation? Because I remember Vladena complained she's not allowed to touch the crown jewels because she's a woman, not that she can't touch the crown jewels because she's not a noble. Nancy gets shouty as she says Vladena will definitely be arrested for this. Vladena pulls a bottle from out of nowhere. She tilts the bottle towards Nancy. Somehow, the poisonous gas gets all over Nancy while leaving Vladena alone. Nancy coughs and collapses as Vladena leaves the room through a different exit. There is a puzzle to make an antidote before Nancy passes out. The screen goes dark at the edges and shakes a little to indicate Nancy is feeling bad. It looks way better than Midnight in Salem, where Nancy and everybody else swayed constantly. This is a timed puzzle. If you take too long, Nancy dies. The thing that bothers me is that Nancy coughs as background noise the entire time. But she also coughs when she talks, so Nancy's coughing when she's coughing. It's like the scene in Midnight in Salem where you talk to May about a band, and the music plays in the background while music plays in the background. Nancy says she has to get the bottle that Vladena left behind. It smells like fish. Yuck! Nancy, there are more important things for you to worry about right now. There is a paper hanging above the chemicals table. This paper was not there during the conversation with Vladena. Either that's a mistake on the developer's part, or Vladena poisoned Nancy, quickly hung up the paper while Nancy's eyes were closed, then left the room. The paper has a list of 4 poisons, along with their cures. You want the third one, which smells like fish. You have to do the potion-making challenge again. All the steps are the same, only the 4 ingredients are different. When you solve the puzzle, the liquid inside the bottle turns red. Wait, why is there liquid in the bottle? We clearly saw it was gas. Click on the bottle to drink it. Your cursor is a magnifying glass for this. I would have used a hand cursor to signify that you're going to drink the bottle, but that's not important. Nancy leaves through Vladena's exit. The secret passage is pretty small. Near the exit door is a side room. There's a sleeping bag near some chains. Presumably, Leo was held captive here. Poor Leo. There's a table with Adela's real gems in what seems to be an ancient scroll belonging to the Zlotys. I think the picture on the scroll is a map of the tunnels, which explains how she got into the alchemist lab. The stuff on the left is about gems and ingredients. I don't understand it. There are 2 letters on the desk that I really wish we could read. There's also a laptop. The laptop screen is only visible for half a second, but if you freeze frame it and zoom in, you can see it's fully designed. I know most people won't see this screen, so let me describe it in more detail than necessary. The right side is a list of crown jewels with Great Britain and Denmark at the top. Oh, maybe that's the target that Vladena is going for. Those are the crown jewels she's going to steal next. The left side is a text conversation with Oscar. He says, "Hello, I stopped by today. I thought we could talk. I missed seeing you." Next, he says, "I do admire your work, and I just wanted you to know. Have you The rest is cut off. Next, he says, "Are you there? I stopped by again. I guess you were busy?" Is it just me, or does it sound like Oscar has a crush on Vladena? I want to know the context of all 3 text messages. Since Vladena didn't respond to any of them, Oscar looks a little desperate. The middle of the screen is a video conference app called Room. The first 2 contacts are Operat and Elka. I'm assuming Nancy clicked on one of them because the game jumps to a video call with Elka. I love how Elka is done in a lower resolution here, like she has a cheap camera. Does the game ever explain why Elka was at her store during this part? Why wasn't she with Vladena, assisting with the crime of the century? Vladena does have to drag an unconscious Leo around with her. That cannot be easy. Merrick steps into the call. Nancy says Vladena's responsible for the gem theft and the hacking. Merrick says she's deceptive. Later on, Elka says Merrick was talking about her. He totally wasn't. He was clearly talking about Vladena. Nancy says to send the police to the vault because Vladena plans to open it soon. A confused Elka asks what's going on. Merrick confesses the truth that Elka's mother died on a mission for Residente. He hopes to make it right by saving the crown jewels. Nancy leaves through the exit. Fortunately, it takes her directly to the vault room. Vladena left Radek's bag with the 7 keys inside. Why? Why would she leave them behind? Nancy has the big puzzle here. The keys are on the right while the list of keys are on the left. Originally, I thought Nancy wrote these notes on the paper, but no, Merrick did that. He gives Nancy this paper during the dead drop section. When did he learn the places where Nancy found the keys? She didn't tell him, did she? Nancy says, I need more information. There must be something I already have. She's right, players need to check the alchemy book in her inventory. You have to back away from the door to look at the alchemy book, which is kind of a pain. The first step is a special one. The only keyhole that's open right now is the sun keyhole at the very top. You have to insert the gold key and turn it to make the other 6 keyholes appear. I probably would have left this step out. It would make enough sense if all 7 keyholes were open at the start. It's obvious that the puzzle is to put the 7 keys into the correct spots. I'm scared to rewatch my first playthrough of the game because I got so stuck on this puzzle. I just gave up and used the solution described in the hints. Even then, I didn't understand what was going on with the puzzle, and that happens with too many puzzles in this game. It's easy enough to know the night key goes in the helmet spot, the candle key goes in the fire spot, and the lab key on the beaker spot. The last 3, not so much. I did not recognize a circle with a cross in it as a compass rose. That matches the map sketch in the cafe. How is that even possible? Did the people who made these locks know about the text message book puzzle hundreds of years in advance? The last 2 symbols are an hourglass and a planet, which are both for keys found in the astronomical clock model. You're supposed to figure out which is which, because the book has a big list of all the alchemy symbols, and one of those is a planet. I think that's how you're supposed to solve it. It's easier to guess blindly, because there's only 2 options. You have a 50% chance of getting it right. I was expecting Nancy to say something like, "There, that looks right," when you solve the puzzle. Instead, there's another special step with the sun key. You click it, and it rotates if the bottom 6 keys are correct. I don't think I would have figured that step out on my own. How are players supposed to realize you click on the sun again after you get the keys in place? Maybe it's for the best that the sun key is treated separately, because that means you only have to manipulate 6 keys and not 7. It does make the puzzle a little easier. Part 2 is turning the 6 keys in the correct order. The clue for this is in the alchemy book, and if you don't realize that, the puzzle is flat out impossible. You'll be stuck staring at the screen, wondering what the heck you're supposed to do. Even if you do look at the alchemy book, it's not immediately obvious how it translates into, "Oh, press the keys in this order." It's definitely another puzzle where it's unclear what to do. You number the planets from 1 to 7. The sun counts as a planet for this. Each planet is associated with a different metal, so you switch it from a list of planets to a list of metals. You turn the keys in the order of the metals. The door opens up and Elka comes running. The strategy guide says nothing about Elka here. I bet the guide left her out in order to avoid spoilers. That's fine by me, but the strategy guide left out other stuff, which is not fine by me. It leaves out some of the achievements. It should have all the achievements. It also leaves out some of the Easter eggs. Those should all be there too. And it leaves out any mention of the bonus ending puzzle. I still don't know for sure what unlocks the puzzle. I'm pretty sure it's get all of the achievements, but there are plenty of vocal YouTube comments telling me I'm wrong about that. The first time I played the game, I didn't like this sudden Elka scene at the end. I think the game would have been fine without Elka as a surprise culprit. The scene of Merrick confessing the truth about her mom's death was enough. The storyline could have ended there. It reminded me of the end of Midnight in Salem, where they kept introducing surprise twists, which dragged out the story. Like, May ran away. Surprise, Tegan's the culprit. Surprise, Jason's the real culprit. Surprise, Alicia's the real culprit. That was too much for me, and I got the same vibes at this point, because the game goes, Radek is the culprit. Surprise, he's working with Merrick. Surprise, they're blackmailed by Lukaji. Surprise, Vladena's the real culprit. Surprise, Elka's the real culprit. My original reaction was sarcasm and anger that the game keeps throwing surprise twist culprits at the end, instead of picking one culprit and sticking with them. When I replayed the game, I liked Elka as the surprise culprit much better, even if it means she can't be my video game crush anymore. After this Elka scene, Nancy enters the vault, and the game goes back to treating Vladena as the main culprit. I could definitely picture a version of the game where the Elka twist doesn't happen, and Vladena is the main culprit all along. You can argue whether or not that would make for a better ending. During my first playthrough, people in the chat started saying, Elka must be the culprit, the instant she showed up in the vault. Congratulations to those people for being smart. Elka says she already called the police. She explains that although Vladena disabled the biometric security, there's still basic security to get through, because the basic security is on a separate timer. This does not make sense to me, but I understand the game needs a plausible sounding explanation for how Nancy's able to get into the vault when she can't use the fingerprint scanner. Elka says she's known the truth about her mother's death for a long time. Like Merrick, she wants to help save the crown jewels for her mother's sake. Nancy has the option to ask Elka to turn off the security, but Elka refuses. Thanks for nothing, Elka. Nancy has a puzzle with electrical circuits. Press the various buttons to rotate different circuits. You want to make a pathway from the arrow in the lower left to the arrow in the upper right. I like this challenge. After this, Nancy has her last round of Cyberblock. I like that puzzle too. I would rather do both of these puzzles 5 times than do that door key puzzle once. Once you unlock the door, Elka reveals herself as the secret villain. She orders you to step away from the door. She says, "You've seen what my ring can do," which is not at all true. Why does she say that? I'm not entirely sure what Elka was thinking at this point. Was she trying to stop Nancy from opening the door? If so, Elka did a pretty terrible job of running interference. All she did was stand in place and do nothing. If Elka was smart, she would have electrocuted Nancy 20 seconds ago, when Nancy's back was turned and Nancy was too distracted to fend off a surprise attack. Elka says she didn't call the police after all. She claims she did all the Lukaji computer stuff, and she faked her crush on Radek. I don't know why pretending to have a crush was part of her evil plan. I think she could have stolen the crown jewels without telling tourists about her crush. Elka is furious about her mother's death. She's extra furious that her grandfather didn't tell her the truth in order to protect her. She plans to frame Residente, especially her grandfather, for the theft. That is incredibly cold-blooded. Nancy and Elka bring in the events of the Silent Spy, which feels like an odd choice. How does Elka know what happened in that game? Yes, in that game, Nancy did not listen when her father warned her to stop the case, but she was trying to stop a terrorist plot to conquer the world with a viral pandemic. Those are major extenuating circumstances. Nancy says her mother is kept alive through happy memories, which is a little corny. Elka says, "You're trying to distract me. Why?" Nancy doesn't respond, which makes it feel like the conversation was cut off. Nancy says Elka should stop here because she can't win. Look, there's one last puzzle! And yes, Elka falls for the look behind you trick. The choreography of the scene is a little off because we can't see Nancy's body. A rectangle goes across the screen from right to left. I assume that is Nancy opening the door and stepping behind it, because in the next shot, the door is open. I'm impressed Nancy could open and sidestep a door that's behind her without looking back. Nancy says, "You were the puzzle." which is a nice one-liner. An angry Elka grabs at Nancy. Elka's hand shakes a lot. I figured she was trying to pull Nancy towards her, so it's a good thing Nancy says, "Whew, got the ring," when the door closes, because I would never have known the ring was what they were struggling over. Nancy turns around to see Vladena holding a knife towards Leo, who's lying asleep on the ground. I don't know why Vladena needs to hold a knife to him. Vladena says she won't kill him if Nancy switches the gems in the crown. I don't understand this part. Why does Vladena, the gem expert, want Nancy to finish the jewel swap? What makes her think Nancy could do that without messing up? Nancy even says, I could break the crown, but Vladena says she's not worried, she can make a replacement. Yeah, but wouldn't that delay Vladena for hours and hours? Something you probably should worry about. Nancy tries to get Vladena to surrender with lies, like, I gave all my evidence to the police, and Elka's already been arrested. Shouldn't Vladena have seen Nancy with Elka through the open door just now? Of course, the real reason Vladena forces Nancy to place the gems is so there can be a puzzle. This puzzle is awful, and I think I hate it even more than the door puzzle. The door puzzle is harder, but at least it has hints telling you what to do. This puzzle has nothing. If you get stuck, there is no getting out of it. The first part is easy enough, I guess. There are 3 big empty spots where jewels should go. Put the jewels in the empty spots. You can't place a jewel in the wrong spot. Nancy won't let you. If that was the entire puzzle, it'd be fine. You need to right-click the gems to rotate them, which is not at all obvious. I think they look perfectly fine without being rotated. But I guess I understand why they want all the gems to face the same way on all 4 sides of the crown. The final gem is a green one. This is the nightmare gem. I got so stuck on this in my first playthrough. The Nancy Drew people commented in the live stream chat to tell me what to do. The idea is that you're placing the gem in an empty spot, but it doesn't look empty at all. It looks like there's a black gem in that spot. When you put the green gem in the place, that area doesn't look different. It looks like you made no change at all. If you blinked for 2 seconds while the gem was being placed, you wouldn't know where the gem is. This is a big graphics failure. The empty spot should look empty, not full. The green gems should not be so dark that they look black, when the color of the gems is an essential puzzle element. A big part of the problem is that the crown is too small to see. It takes up less than half of the screen. There is so much blank space above and below the crown, you could move it to the top of the screen and place a second crown below it without hitting the inventory bar. If the game zoomed in on the crown so it was twice as big, then this puzzle wouldn't be so bad. This must be, the 4th time I've complained about items being too small in examination mode? They must have made things small on purpose for players using a different screen resolution. In general, things never appear on the far right or far left edges of the screen. There's a buffer zone of about 15% on both sides, which is removed if you're not playing on widescreen. I actually don't think it's removed. I think they just black out those sides, but that's neither here nor there. This is one of the places where it feels like they limited themselves by designing the puzzle for tiny full screen, because this puzzle desperately needs to be optimized for HD widescreen. That must be the reason why the original games do not let you change the game's resolution. It's too hard to have a puzzle work on there's like 20 different resolutions. Did they do each puzzle 20 times? No, that would have been way too much work. Again, the crown puzzle would be fine if it was just placing the 3 big gems. The impossibly small green gem ruins the puzzle. I would have removed it entirely. If it was only there in senior mode, that could have worked. Honestly, I think people would have liked a senior mode version of this puzzle where you have to place 8 gems and not just 4. But the puzzle is not over. You also have to place Elka's ring on the crown. I'm sure many players got stuck because they didn't realize that's a requirement. I put all the gems on the crown. Why isn't the puzzle over? Do I have to do something with the other gems in my inventory? Oh yeah, Adela's real gems are in the inventory. I'm sure that confused players too, because you don't do anything with them. When the puzzle starts, Nancy says, I can't tamper with it while Vladena is watching. I don't think this does a good enough job of communicating the challenge. Nancy should have said something more specific, like, I can't place the ring while Vladena is watching. Even that's not perfect. It took me a while to realize the eyeball in the upper left is supposed to be Vladena's line of vision. Sometimes she looks at the crown, sometimes she looks at Leo. You can safely place the ring when Vladena looks away. I think it would have made more sense if Vladena's head was visible on the left so you could literally see her look the other direction. That's more obvious than an unexplained eye icon that's never appeared before. We can see Vladena's arm and legs on screen during this puzzle, so they definitely had room to show Vladena's body. Why is Vladena looking at Leo so often? He's asleep and not moving. She doesn't need to have her knife trained on him at all times. I just had a thought. What if this eye icon had been on screen during the Snoop Through Adela's Bag challenge? Then players would know what it means going into the final puzzle, and that would make this puzzle work better. I think the puzzle would be okay if it was just place the ring on the crown while Vladena's looking away. But no, you have to place the ring in a specific spot. Surprise, surprise, I think this was also done badly. It goes at the base of one of the 4 stems. The 4 stems are identical. The solution should be place the gem at the base of any stem, not place it at the base of one specific stem. Your cursor turns into a magnifying glass when you're over the correct spot. That's how you know where to place the ring. It's not a perfect method, but it works well enough. I wish the cursor also changed over the spot where the green gem is supposed to be placed. That would have saved a lot of frustration. When you click on the correct spot, a ghost ring appears there. That's the clue to place the ring in that spot. It is a little weird the ring gets a separate ghost version when the gems didn't get separate ghost versions, but whatever, I am finished complaining about this puzzle. It's not the last puzzle of the game, but it definitely feels like an end-of-game puzzle. When you're done, Nancy says, "You better check to see if I did it right." Vladena puts the knife away and picks up the crown. Vladena comments about touching the crown, even though she's not of noble blood. Which again, makes me think there was a nobility subplot in an earlier draft of the game script. Vladena puts the crown on her head, and she's instantly electrocuted by the ring. I'm not sure how that worked. Nancy put the ring on top of the crown, not the bottom. It should not be touching the hair of someone wearing the crown. Vladena falls to the ground unconscious. I love how the crown stays perfectly balanced on her head as this happens. Leo wakes up. Perfect timing, Father Leo. Nancy figures they should leave. They don't have to go home, but they can't stay here. I don't know, staying here until the police come to rescue them sounds like a good idea to me. Merrick knows where Nancy is. He would probably come to help her within the hour. Leo thinks there could be a secret escape route in the wall, just like the one Vladena used to kidnap him. He seems to think that happened a short while ago, but it's been over a day. Was he drugged the whole time? No wonder he seems a little disoriented. Nancy says Elka can definitely find her way in, if given enough time. Fortunately, that's not true. This time challenge ends with Vladena waking up, not Elka coming in. I suppose Nancy could have avoided this game over by electrocuting Vladena into unconsciousness every 5 minutes, but that would have been cruel. I like the candle puzzle, although I'm sure some people got terribly stuck because they had no idea what the puzzle even is. You're supposed to notice each candelabra in the room has a different number of candles on top. Click on the 1 candle, then the 2 candle, then the 3 candle, and so on until the door opens. This puzzle is harder than it should be because it always seems like one of the candles is blocked from the player's view. Maybe I'm just looking at them from the wrong angle. I don't know. Nancy and Leo go out through the exit. Then we get a brief scene of Nancy and Leo in the tunnels. Honestly, I would have left this scene out of the game. It does not add anything. Leo worries about missing his conference. Nancy tells him to stay here with his cat while she gets the police. And then you have to find the exit. Nancy's right next to the staircase that leads to Leo's office. I don't know why Nancy and Leo can't use that exit. This time the exit is the closest locked door. Use the screwdriver on it for the door unlocking puzzle again. As I said, I would have left this brief scene out of the game. I don't know why they put the finale on hold for a minute, so Nancy could repeat the door unlocking puzzle. Next, we get the scene where Elka's arrested. She's angrily banging on the door and yelling. The police yell, Alishka Strojnik, which I'm guessing is Elka's full name. What a strange moment to learn Elka is a nickname. Even Merrick's will didn't use the name Alishka. Elka says, Nancy, I was trying to help you. Like she's going to launch into a big fake friend production for the sake of the police. It could have been cool to see Elka try to worm her way out of trouble. It's not like Nancy has any undeniable evidence of Elka's guilt. Then again, I honestly think the ending goes on a little too long. If this had been one of the earlier games of the series, things would already be over by now. The final 15 minutes of the game would be reduced to, like, 2 sentences in Nancy's endgame letter about what happened after the culprit was caught. Merrick and Radek run into the room. A stunned Radek says, You were on the call. What call is he talking about? The video call with Elka? That makes no sense, because it was no secret that Elka was on the call to Elka. How does Radek know about that call anyway? He wasn't there. Honestly, what has Radek been doing for the past 30 minutes? Just standing around in Merrick's store doing nothing? The invisible police officers tell everyone to clear the scene, so the characters move to a corner with a statue. It feels like the designers wanted to show off that statue because they put a lot of effort into making it. Merrick says, I did not believe it when you told me. And oh my gosh, when did Nancy tell Merrick that Elka is the culprit? Don't tell me she had another off-screen conversation with him. Nancy fails to convince Merrick not to blame himself for Elka's actions. Merrick wanders off. Nancy gives the keys to Radek. He says, You would trust them to a thief? Nancy says, A thief? No. A patriot? Yes. I think this is a weird delivery of a weird line. Why would Nancy giggle when trying to build up Radek's self-esteem? Is he that sad to learn Elka's crush on him was fake? I thought he didn't know about her crush. Nancy says Radek will destroy the keys, which he shouldn't do. They are important evidence that should go to the police. Nancy says she'll return the blueprints to their original locations. Presumably she'll return everything else too, like the gems she stole from the museum. Again, she shouldn't do that. It's important evidence that should go to the police. The game skips to the next day. There's fancy scenery of the courtyard before Nancy talks to Adela. She says the police have enough proof to convict Ladena and Elka. Agent Zane appears in person. When I first played the game, the chat exploded at this point because Zane is so handsome. I think Agent Zane's okay. He's so popular, I think he really should have been an in-person character for the entire game. It seems weird to have him as a phone contact the whole time, only for him to briefly show up at the end to say all the bad guys were arrested off-screen. He also says that Lukashi made up viruses in order to sell more virus protection software. Adela asks why Elka went from being the leader of an organized cyber crime ring to gem theft. Well, she did that because otherwise the game wouldn't have happened. I mean, Nancy says Elka couldn't frame Residente for any crimes other than a jewel heist. I highly doubt that. I think she could have gotten Merrick arrested for something else. I mean, she was blackmailing him. She could have had him arrested for that. Zane looked over the blackmail material against Residente. Since Merrick and Radek are such swell guys, he's decided not to prosecute them. He'll let the local police handle that. Adela is amused because she knows the police are useless and won't do anything. Wow, those are some lazy police officers if they do nothing after being given a completed case. Either way, I find it amusing that the police are trustworthy enough to stop Elka, but not trustworthy enough to stop Merrick. I guess they only try if it's a major crime. Nancy says they still haven't found the necklace's original owner. Radek and Merrick arrive, acting nervous. They return Nancy's phone, which is not the same color as the phone she left with them. Everyone laughs as Nancy gets a bunch of phone notifications all at once. If you unlock the secret ending, Merrick says he found something strange when removing the fake gems. It's a puzzle! You need to place all the gems in the correct spots and rotate them to complete the design on the back. You can flip the necklace to see the back at any time. Whenever you look at the back of the necklace, all the gems disappear from the bottom half of the screen. I don't know why. That feels like a programming error. This puzzle is impossible to see without turning down the game's brightness. The lines are way too thin and faint. I think there are 44 gems in total. Most of the gems come in pairs. It can be hard to keep track of the gems because you're constantly flipping the necklace over, so the gems keep going to the left side, to the right side, and back again. When you remove a gem, it snaps back into its starting position. I recommend saving the circular gems for last because they're the hardest. Not only are they the smallest, but there's 6 of them. When you solve the puzzle, the game zooms in on the necklace, so it takes up half the screen. That makes me mad. Why couldn't the necklace have been that large the whole time? I know they needed room at the bottom for the gems, but it's just like the crown puzzle. The ability to zoom in would have been great. We know the game has a zoom in feature. The necklace says House of Rosenberg Witkowski. Nancy remembers that is Patricia's last name. She talks with Patricia for a bit. Patricia is surprised to learn her relatives were telling the truth when they said they used to be nobles. Adela gives the necklace back to Patricia. She puts it on and jokes she can wear it while cleaning the coffee machine. Ha ha ha. If you didn't get the secret ending, the game jumps from the joke about Nancy's phone to this point. It's a black screen. Nancy says, "Thank you all," and everyone leaves. We finish with Nancy by herself in the cafe. She got texts from her father and Ned. Call one of them to end the game. It seems dumb that they had Nancy's father in her contact list for the entire game when all he gets is a single phone call at the end. I would have left him out of the game completely. The 2 phone calls are near identical, and I think too much time is spent recapping the plot of the game. Players already know that Vladena and Elka were working together, even if Carson and Ned don't know that. Nancy doesn't need to explain it. The ending recap with Adela and Zane was better, since it contained new information. Nancy touches on all the characters who were not mentioned in Adela's recap. She says she's going to have one last coffee with cinnamon. 5 points to anyone who remembers the throwaway line about cinnamon that Nancy's referencing here. I think the trivia question at the end is just as low effort as the one in Midnight in Salem. You don't get anything for it. Okay, you get an achievement, but still, I want to hear a sound effect when you get the trivia question right. We finish with logos from 5 different companies that worked on the game. I wonder which company did what. They reused the intro animation from Nancy Drew games 22 through 32, which is awkward because it features the former voice of Nancy Drew. They use that at the end of Midnight in Salem too. Why not have the current voice of Nancy Drew in your logo animation? That's all I have to say about Mystery of the Seven Keys. It's definitely better than Midnight in Salem, but I think there's plenty of room for improvement, especially with the broken hint system and a lot of the puzzle designs. Hopefully the game will get an update which fixes a lot of the problems. I was going to give it a 7 out of 10. But that seems overly generous considering how much complaining I did in this deep dive examination of the game. I give Nancy Drew number 34, Mystery of the Seven Keys, a 6 out of 10.